No, because it's BX D&D. What's up, everybody? We're a little early because this is the first stream that we're doing on my new internet connection, and I just want to see how it's doing in terms of the stability of the connection, and if we're getting any dropping. But it looks pretty good. The pre-stream indeed. This feels a little bright. There we go. For the pre-stream. What's going on, everybody? It should be a short stream today because I was supposed to have a teledoc appointment and my doctor never showed up, which is cool. So then I had to reschedule it, but I really need to get it. I need to get this appointment so I can renew my prescription. And so they had an appointment at like 10. So I chose it for today, 10 p.m. So we have to be done before 10 p.m. today. At least a little bit before, so I can go check in for my doctor's appointment. So, did you hear that Chris Perkins think fudging is okay? Well, that doesn't surprise me, but yeah, sure. Why not? So, I mean, what it really comes down to is, what do you think? How do you view what do you view the role of the game and the game master? And if you think that the only role of the game and the game master is to provide a movie-like experience, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, a movie is lying to you, right? It's all contrived ahead of time. You know, the tension in a movie isn't real; it's created. The screenwriter, or the whatever, right? Wrote it that way. If a character is going to die, it's not up to chance. It's whatever they wrote it to be. And you know, you could argue that the CGI and the special effects and all that other stuff, I mean, that's them lying to you, right? And so, but we have fun with the movie, right? Don't people like movies? People like movies. People like books. So if you view the role-playing game experience, and if you view the role of the game master as sort of the presenter of this sort of movie-like experience, then I would think that you would naturally be okay with fudging, because that's what movie directors do. That's what authors do. That's what screenwriters do. So, yeah, I just happen to think that that's not at all what makes role-playing games cool. And also, I think that I have movies and books and arguably video games for that type of things. And so I don't need that kind of experience from role-playing games, because I get that kind of experience from pretty much every other form of media, right? So that's why I'm against fudging, if you will. No, historically, the people who have wrote the rules for most of D&D have also been the people who have been the most okay with you ignoring them / fudging / doing whatever you want, at least from the D&D perspective. Gary Gygax was very famous in his AD&D for being like, these are the rules, and if you violate them, I will come kill you. But he was also very famous for basically saying, you know, I ignore the dice, and the only purpose for dice, I ignore the rules, and the only reason I have dice is to enjoy the sound of the click clack they make behind my screen or whatever. So. Take care, Lions at Gaming. I will not be touching on the map book today. We might do a part 2. There's a tip goal for a part 2, but you know. Also, I'm more hesitant to wait. I don't necessarily want to cover, the tip goal or the camp. I don't want to like spoil the whole campaign, right? It is 2 minutes till 7 p.m. By that definition, yes. The key thing though is it's not just about fudging. It's about the illusion that you aren't fudging. A lot of people, like, for example, Fabula Ultima, when a GM spends an Ultima point, or Daggerheart, when a GM spends a Fear point. That's fudging. It's just a part of the game. It's regulated. It's known. It's a known factor. What makes the fudge is that the players don't know it's happening. So if the players are fudging, then they are reminded that this is not actually real, Right. Cinnabos, a great example of this is in Fabula Ultima. A player can choose deliberately to fail a roll on purpose, and they gain a Fabula point. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Gary was pretty good about a lot of different correspondence, and he's got a lot of a lot of posts and all this other stuff out there. So, he was quite prolific in his later years. All righty. Here we go. RPG! 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 But that's not what we do. We do this.
Hey, let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melenda. Welcome to a first look stream brought to us by Koss from the Knights of Last Call Patreon. Thank you, Koss, for supporting this. Koss was generous enough to give us a nice, significant donation, which is on credit. I still owe him some time and stuff with me. However, he did suggest that since we hadn't gotten a chance to get around to that yet, he said, "Well, why don't you take a look at Dolmenwood?" And I said, "Okay." So tonight we're going to be taking a look at Dolmenwood, and to be clear, we do have a tip goal, which is Dolmenwood Part 2, which is to look at the campaign book. So Dolmenwood is a bunch of different things. Dolmenwood is a rule set, and I use that quotation marks deliberately. Dolmenwood is also a campaign setting. So the real reason that we're going to look at this is because Dolmenwood is coming out of the Exalted Funeral Press, and specifically from the Necrotic Gnome publishing group, aka Gavin Norman. And Necrotic Gnome, through Exalted Funeral, is the well-known creator of Old School Essentials. We actually just gave away an Old School Essentials box set just the other day. Old School Essentials, I have a variety of thoughts on this, which is that on one hand, Old School Essentials is quite literally a reproduction of BX D&D, specifically BX D&D, which is to say Basic Expert D&D, 1981, magenta box set, written by Tom Moldvay and David Zebcook. Now, why is it called Basic Expert? Well, the reason it's called Basic Expert is because it came in 2 boxes. This is the first box, which is Basic, okay? And it was a red book. This book, right? And it was all of 64 pages. It came with these 3-hole punches, by the way, so that you could rip out the pages and put them into a binder, which of course is what people did. But there was a follow-up book to this same year, which was the Expert set. Right? So you've got B and you've got X. This is BX D&D. These two books together is BX D&D. And even BX D&D is not original. All BX D&D was doing was a sort of a version or a continuation of the original Dungeons and Dragons, which came out in 1974. So when advanced Dungeons and Dragons came out, it took a different lineage, kind of beget its own lineage. So advanced Dungeons and Dragons was the fork, right? It was the thing that sort of did something differently. Basic D&D was a continuation of the original D&D. So ironically, right, the original D&D was considered basic. And what did that really mean? Well, it meant that the rules were pretty simple. And the classes were pretty simple. The ancestries were very simple. There wasn't a lot of abilities on the character classes. There weren't a lot of rules. It was a pretty basic dungeon crawler game. So that was the original D&D. That was Basic D&D. And Basic D&D, continued on for 20 plus years. Zarian asks, how does BECME compare to BX? We could do that in a different, that would be an interesting stream, which would be to talk about the different versions of Basic that came out all over the years. Basic technically don't have authors. Basics have editors. So the people who wrote Basic D&D were never called authors. They were called editors, because technically what they are doing is they are sort of picking and choosing their favorite rules from BX, from Basic D&D, and putting them into that version of the game. One of the most important things that BECME did was BECME took D&D up to 36th level. A lot of people were like, oh, D&D goes to 20th level. Actually, no. Original D&D technically went to infinite levels. And even AD&D let you go beyond 20th level. D&D really never did anything. Never had a 20 level cap until 3rd edition. And Basic D&D went to 36th level. Didn't Holmes basically write that book? Yes and no. I mean, so this is the Holmes version. This was the original Basic of D&D. And this one was edited by John Eric Holmes. And he basically took the rules that were present in D&D, and it also had become part of the zeitgeist, right? And he created this. This was the original Basic D&D. Because at that point, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons had come out, and he basically said, "Hey, but I like the original D&D, and I'd like for people to keep being able to play that." So he went to TSR and said, "Hey, I will edit together all the rules that have basically come out in the last 5 years." D&D came out in 74. He made that version roughly 79, and I'll let me put together kind of the greatest hits of D&D. What's come out? Some of the changes, some of the errata, some of the Dragon Magazine stuff, and we'll put it in together. It's a lot of work. Editing could be a huge deal for sure. I'm not saying they didn't do anything, but he didn't really write rules. You know what I mean? It was pretty basic. And to be clear, I think each version of Basic got more and more complicated. BECME, which is the 1983 Basic, ultimately culminated in this, which is the Rules Cyclopedia. And this game is actually surprisingly modern from a certain perspective. It had rules for fighters, had this weapon mastery system, and it had all sorts of crazy systems for domain management and mass combat rules, stronghold dominion rules, with surprisingly deep elements. It had rules for combat, like a wrestling subsystem, flying rules, underwater rules, hand-to-hand striking rules, all this other stuff. So in many ways, each version of Basic got kind of more complicated than the next or than the last. Anyways, TLDR, 3rd edition D&D gets released, and when 3rd edition D&D gets released, so does the OGL. And it is a halcyon time, and all these publishers are publishing their own versions of D&D or stuff for D&D under the OGL. And then some enterprising people discover or figure out that the OGL basically lets you print old D&D stuff. And I remember at this point, this is like before the era of PDFs and all this other stuff. So all the old versions of D&D were out of print completely. You could find them maybe at a used bookstore. Would be the only way that you could really get a copy. They weren't particularly expensive, but they were relatively rare. Hackmaster did start this off a little bit because Hackmaster basically sued Wizards of the Coast, and they said, "Hey, you used our comics without our permission. We need to be compensated." And they basically said, "Well, we'll let you use our rules." And they said, "Okay." So they made a variant of the game called Hackmaster 4th Edition, which was a satirical take on Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Well, eventually, some people got together and people started talking about it. And there came to be this realization that you could create your own version of D&D. And the first people to do this were Matt Finch. And Matt Finch is, a lot of people have read Matt Finch. Even if you haven't read Matt Finch is the author of the the primer to old school gaming. It's a pretty famous, 10, 15, 20 page PDF. It's been floating around forever. And the Matt Finch, TSR used to have the Knights of the Dinner Table comic. No, Knights of the Dinner Table comic was always owned by Jolly Blackburn and them. They used to license it to Wizards of the Coast to publish it in the Dragon magazine. But no, Knights of the Dinner Table has always been owned by Jolly Blackburn and thing. I think it was something about maybe like a digital print or something like that. But I don't remember. Anyways, Kenzer and Co., they were the ones who sold them. What actually was 2nd edition? I don't even know. I don't even know if I have 2nd edition on my table. I think I might have put it away. Poor 2nd edition. Much maligned. I thought I had 2nd edition on my bookshelf. Maybe I did, and I took it down to read it. Anyways, we're not talking about 2nd edition here. So they publish. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, sorry. So they publish. They being Matt Finch. They publish Osric. Okay, and Osric was if you want to know why it's called OSR, it's because I pretty much believe it's because of Osric. So Osric was the old school reference and index compilation. And the old school reference index compilation was basically a reprint, word for word, of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. And the idea was they realized is that they could print the rules of the, they could print the rules of D&D, AD&D, and get away with it. Now, they made no attempts here to change anything. It was literally a word-for-word copy of D&D's rule set, and including all the language of Gary Gygax and all this other stuff. And this was the beginning, if you will, of the OSR. And this was for AD&D, the AD&D first edition. Now, somebody decided, well, if we could do that with Osric, if we could do that for AD&D first edition, why can't we do that for BX D&D? Remember, this was BX D&D. And my camera has been really mad about the font thing. This is why, by the way, this is another reason why I don't like my background, because it makes it things this. Correct. Yes, they literally couldn't reprint. I'm sorry. When I say word for word, I mean they didn't really change the rules at all. They didn't add anything because, they had to pretend it was based off of third edition because that was the thing. Well, guess what? Someone did do this for BXD&D, and it's called Labyrinth Lord. And Labyrinth Lord was the OSR printing of this. Now, this is a long-winded way of saying this because I really want to highlight this, and this is something I really want to highlight. So this was put together by Daniel Proctor, and let me read you the intro to Daniel Proctor. He says, now this is the 5th edition of it. I mean, like, this isn't the OOG. This wasn't the original one. This is like the 5th printing. But his foreword to the game says, and I quote, "Labyrinth Lord is not new and is not innovative. This game exists solely as an attempt to help breathe life back into old school fantasy gaming, to do some small part in expanding its fan base. Labyrinth Lord follows in the footsteps of other retro clone games. One might think of it as an emulator meant to employ game rules, algorithms, from early 1980s games by using a presentation in combination with terms that are open game content provided under the Open Gaming License version 1.0A by Wizards of the Coast. Labyrinth Lord is a restatement of a set of rules that are otherwise out of print and no longer commercially supported. This work follows the idea that game rules themselves are not subject to copyright, only a specific presentation of those rules are. The goal of Labyrinth Lord and other retro clone systems is to make rules currently available using a common reference for third-party publishers to create gaming materials that is compatible with particular retro clone system, but also with any system which attempts to emulate. By doing so, we have hoped to build a market for games that would otherwise have been allowed to fade into the past." So, TLDR. This is, basically a legally distinct carbon copy of the original BX D&D rule set. And in fact, you can tell that this is true because, now to be clear, this is BNX. Now, by the way, Basic D&D, that little red book I showed you, was 64 pages. X D&D, Expert D&D book, was about 70 pages. So about 134 pages in total. And guess how long this book is? It's 133 pages long. This book is quite literally those two books just printed together. So, anyways, that was Labyrinth Lord. But it was printed using the same basic language and structure and formatting, which is just to say endless blocks of text. Now, enter Necrotic Gnome and Gavin Norman. They go and they release this. All old school essentials is it's those same rules from that same game. And there we go. Hold a sec here. I know it looks cool, but we gotta turn that off. It's the same rules from that same game, but now it's been cleaned up. It now has color and, nice formatting, and ambiguities have been, cleaned up, and it's been given a really nice treatment. It's been created into digest size. And while the structure and the format of the rules were still essentially the same, it was a true restatement in the sense that they were like, okay, how do we make this actually modern and readable? But here's the problem. It's not a problem. I own it. In fact, I own OSE and I own OSE Advanced. OSE is BX, but readable. I would completely agree with that. But at some point, and I'm not sure what point that was, people in the, it's not even Gavin Norman's fault, but at some point, people started to refer to OSE as if it was its own unique thing. And I always found that to be a little bit bothersome and insulting, because it was never intended to be its own thing. It was intended to be a reprint of a reprint of a reprint. Okay, to be clear, right? OSE is a cleaned up, reprinted version of, if you will, Labyrinth Lord, which is to say a version of BX printed under the OGL, which is itself a reprint of BX D&D, which is itself an edited and combined version of the original 1974 D&D. So in some ways, OSE is the most direct lineage. Like if you were doing, like if the king was dead and you were trying to figure out like who's the most recent heir apparent of that, of that lineage, it would be in many ways OSE. But at some point, other people started, referring to that as if it was sort of its own unique game. And this brings us to Dolmenwood. And the reason it brings us to Dolmenwood is because Dolmenwood is written. Now, this is a first look, which is to say I haven't actually looked at this game. I will say, shout out to Exalted Funeral for sending us a copy of Dolmenwood. So we really appreciate that. This 200-page book seems to be very, very well made. Its listed purchase price is only $30. The paper seems to be of good quality. The binding seems to be all right. It's got a nice little ribbon in it, and it seems like a pretty good deal for $30. However, this is sort of an interesting take, because what is happening now is we're kind of going the other way, right? Like OSE was trying to make the game really, really simple from the original game, and now they're sort of adding complexity back onto it. But Dolmenwood, as written, is supposed to be a sort of variation on basic D&D. Now, to be clear, we can see this because this book is, now, by the way, we can still see this here. Look here, this work includes material taken from the system, reference document and all this other stuff. But this book is 192 pages long, which tells us that at some point, they added additional rules to this game. So what we're actually going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at the Dolmenwood game system itself. Now, we do have a tip goal, but at some point we may need to look at we want to look at the campaign guide as well, which they also sent to us as well. And as a result of that, the question is it really a lot of people have been talking about like, oh, this will be the system of the year. So the question is Dolmenwood really a system, or is it just a restatement of old school essentials? In other words, why does this book exist? Does this book need to exist? And I think we can kind of try to get into that and answer that today. So for starters, Dolmenwood is listed as Dolmenwood Adventure and Peril in a Fairy Tale Wood. So even the OG, the book itself exists basically kind of almost like Land of Eam. And maybe this is the new thing, because Land of Eam, by the way, is also published by Exalted Funeral. So maybe the new thing to do from Exalted Funeral is to publish a game system and a campaign system, and then kind of say they're independent, but really they're not, and you're kind of intended to play them all at the same time. Maybe, question mark. I don't know. But it is kind of interesting that we have two games that we've covered recently that both kind of follow that same pattern. Maybe that's the new, maybe that's the new hotness. Isn't, in a way, right? That's what Kelsey did, right? Kelsey created Shadowdark, and then Kelsey created Western Reaches. And in some ways, right, Western Reaches is just a campaign setting, but really it's kind of a campaign setting. But I guess Shadowdark's been out for a while, so that's not fair. Like Dolmenwood and Land of Eam came with, they've released at the same time as their campaign setting. So the two feel more, tied together, as well. So here we have the cover for this. And again, I think it looks awesome. This is the kind of art style that I think is really awesome. I love painterly looks for books and covers. Even if this is kind of obviously quasi-impressionistic watercolor, which I love, but even like a classic Larry Elmore, Jeff Easley cover is still painterly in its own way. It's the modern sort of kind of quasi-digital art work that I don't necessarily like as much. And here we have the game. Now, I will say I have played a lot of BX D&D over the years. So it's kind of interesting for me to sort of take a look at this and, how to view it in the modern lens. And what is the point of this? What is the point of this game system? Why do we keep remaking BX D&D? And because even it could be argued that so many of the OSR games that have come out over the last 10 plus years have basically just been restatements of BX D&D. So one of the things that we've never really covered it officially on this channel, like BX or OSE. And so I think it'll be interesting to see like, hey, how different is this? And why are there certain rules or why are there certain changes? And of course, is this really a standalone system? Tundala says, I think this is more of a setting book with a system attached than a remake of BX, which, if so, is a really interesting idea, which begs the question. A lot of people have been talking about, Dolmenwood is going to be for sure, win Game of the Year for the Ennies. Is this really a game, or is it just a campaign setting with a system attached? So I think that's interesting. So we have here the basic rules of the game. We have our races called kindreds. We have our classes. So already there's a little bit of a distinction here. OSE does this too, to be fair. Or at least OSE Advanced does. But of course, remember in original BX D&D, race and class were combined. You didn't pick a separate race from a separate class. Elf was both your race and your class. Halfling was both your race and your class. Magic user meant you were a human. Fighter meant you were a human. So it was like human, fighter, elf. So here we have these different list of kindreds, and obviously these are different than our classic Tolkien-esque, right? BX is pure Tolkien, right? You've got humans, dwarves, elves, and hobbits. In fact, remember in original D&D, they were called hobbits. Gary Gygax got sued by Tolkien. He had to change it to halflings. But we can see here, there's a kind of a fairy tale fantasy vibe here. Breggles and Grimalkins and Woodgrews and all that other stuff. For classes, BX D&D originally only had fighter, thief, magic user, cleric. That's it. So here we can see bard, cleric, enchanter, fighter, friar, hunter, knight, magician, and thief. Now, already this makes me put on my question mark hat, because historically, these games are exceptionally rules light. They do not have a lot of depth. In fact, you can see each of these classes is only 2 pages long. So why do we need 9 of them? We'll find out. That's kind of interesting. This is an initial, Derek question mark. Next, we get into magic. We have arcane magic and holy magic, which normally I would think we would call arcane and divine. I think calling it holy magic actually is a nice touch. There is a separate magic system for fairy magic. Again, very much tying this system into this fairy world of Dolmenwood. Lastly, we get into the classic old school D&D stuff of horses and vehicles and beverages and fungi and herb and retainers and specialist services. This is particularly interesting to me because the one thing that I really want to know from the powers that be, which again, we'll never get this answer because even this audience is fairly self-selecting, which is originally in D&D, the view of Gary Gygax was that, we're coming from a world of wargaming, characters, notable heroes always had their retinue, right? We talked about that, right? Odysseus from the Odyssey had his crew. Achilles had his myrmidons. Charlemagne had his peers. King Arthur had his knights, right? Every famous hero had their circle of henchmen, their circle of loyal retainers. And those rules were part of early basic D&D. In fact, in a game that was relatively short in length, a fair number of words a fair number of paragraphs were spent describing the role of the retainer versus the role of the specialist. Believe it or not, these things were completely different. Retainers in the basic D&D sense were basically intern adventurers who would go on dungeon adventures with you. They would journey into the deeps with you. They would fight monsters and earn experience points. Specialists were things like everything from cooks to valets, men-at-arms, blacksmiths, sages, who basically worked for you. They might even go out into the field with you, but they wouldn't go into a dungeon with you. Interesting side note. There's a lot of little interesting side notes here. The when we look at the original monster entries from those days, you will see that when monsters appeared, there was this random number of monsters that appeared, and there was usually different values. One of those values, which was a much smaller range, would be if you encountered that monster randomly, let's say in a dungeon. I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass, so don't you could spot check me, but I'm just pulling them out of my ass. So something like goblin might be like 3d6 goblins. And that number meant if you encountered goblins as a random encounter in a dungeon, then you were going to encounter 3d6 goblins. But that goblin entry would also have something that would say something like 2d6 times 10 goblins. And that entry was for if you encountered goblins outside the dungeon. Let's say when you were traveling overland, if you were traveling overworld. And one of the main differentiators from original... I have to go get it. One of the main differentiators from this game, Basic B, to this game, Expert, was that this game, in addition to only giving you the first couple of levels of the character's progression, was very much focused on the dungeon. This game, Expert, basically was the promotion from just dungeon. Oh, there's a lot of history to go through here. How do I phrase all this? Okay. The original that's originally a Gridlock Studios. That's literally only a 2 goblin difference at max rolls. 3d6 versus 2d6 times 10. No, that would be 18 versus 120. Okay. I was like, okay. So with this version of D&D, only went to level 3. And the idea of this game campaign setting was that there were no overland travel rules. In fact, traveling the overworld was very dangerous. And so the real premise of this version of D&D was that you were basically in a town, and basically right outside the town was the dungeon. And this version of D&D, some of this is, my interpretation. Some of this is from reading, the last 30 plus years of these games. Some of it is the game itself. But the gist I got of this was that the very first dungeon that your dungeon master created was supposed to be a dungeon that was basically right outside of the town. It didn't involve any overland travel because overland travel was very dangerous and volatile. And the entire game was set to be from levels 1 to 3. And this was supposed to be enough of a game for you and your friends to play in that dungeon that's right outside of town, the newbie dungeon, if you will, and get to level 3 and be level 3. And then once you did that, then you were ready for expert D&D. Now, expert D&D introduced what we would now call the hex crawl. Okay, hexes didn't really exist in this book. If you read this book, there are no rules for traveling overland.
$50. Love the first looks. Still prefer Big Me.
Thank you, Sephiroth. Massive tip. Thank you so much. Well, there we go. Tip goal completed. Yeah, we could talk about Beck Me, Sephiroth. We could do a whole stream on just BX versus Beck Me. I think that might be kind of fun, Sephiroth. That'd be actually kind of really interesting. We should do that someday. Beck Me is definitely more complex, and I think part of the reason why BX D&D has sort of won out over Beck Me is because of how simple it is. That's right. Zarian also votes for a stream on Beck Me. Okay, we'll put this. We'll get this into the queue. Thank you, Sephiroth. We'll get this into the queue. So that's pretty cool. Also, Beck Me, if you cared about it, right, took the game because BX D&D, for all of its awesomeness, X D&D expert only took your characters up to level 14. So this game still only went to 14. There was supposed to be a third book called Companion, which never got published. Instead, they reprinted Basic D&D, which was called, it was called Redbox Basic, which is arguably, I think, one of the top selling, or one of the, if not the most top selling D&D product of all time. This is the one with that, famous Larry Elmore cover, right, of the fighter with the shield, and the dragon is, leering overhead going, that one. The red box. Everyone knows it. Red Box Basic is what it's usually called. And that, in some ways, is the most famous D&D art / product of all time. But this is the one that has stuck through it. Anyways, expert D&D introduced overland travel. It introduced procedures and rules for this. And in fact, this game, expert D&D, had, I'm going to zoom in here. Expert D&D had, for the first time ever, things like how to design a wilderness and how to create a base town and, where to place additional encounters in the world. So all of that stuff became part of expert D&D, which was overland travel. But when you were traveling overland and hexes and getting lost and all this stuff, when you were traveling overland, you might encounter a lot of monsters. And so this is why they introduced the idea that in expert D&D, you would hire a bunch of men-at-arms who would not go into the dungeon with you, but they would travel with you as sort of like a roving personal army, so that when you did encounter, say, 50 goblins, okay, you could basically have kind of a mass combat. And it was the only way that you were kind of intended to do this. But basically, this introduced the idea of doing stuff out in the world. Also, completely, we're way off topic here, but this is the cover for Basic D&D from 1981. We've got this kind of snaky dragon thing. And we've got like a dwarf with a spear and a shield here. We've got this sorceress with her weird magical orb ready. They're in some sort of dungeon, right? And then, I was making sure I had it. And then the Dungeon Master's Guide is some wizard, maybe a villain, who knows? And he appears to be casting some sort of ritual, and he's looking through like a magical seeing portal, and he is seeing the scene from the basic game, right? Which is kind of cool. And what I always thought was a really cool homage, this is the cover of the 4th edition Player's Handbook. You know, you got a dragonborn warrior fighter guy with a sorcerer person. Very cool. And then the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide is a dragon who is looking through a crystal ball at the artwork from the Player's Handbook. I always thought that was a really cool little Easter egg from 4th edition. And it came from this. Anyways, all of that was a really long way of saying, I wonder how many people in today's modern era who are playing in the OSR are actually using henchmen, hirelings, retainers, specialists. I would venture to guess it's pretty low. That's just my total, neat guess. Big Die Energy, thank you for the $5 super chat. Oh, catching the VOD later. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you for supporting First Looks here at Night's Last Call. All right. Moving on. We then had, we have a big chapter on adventuring. By the way, you got to love, this is one of those things that you either love it or you hate it. Okay. We have 3 pages we have 2 pages just on hounds. We have 2 pages on horses and vehicles. We have 2 pages on pipe leaf. We have 2 pages on combat. So, obviously, the focus of the rules in this game is really more about the core rules of the game, which is to say skill checks or ability checks or saving throws, and this procedure of the game. Then we get all of the stuff, a lot of stuff that you would expect to see for sort of dungeon delving type rules, including things like, darkness, doors, wandering monsters, traps, and those type of things. We then have rules for travel, camping, dungeons, encounters, and an example of combat. And then lastly, we end this book with an appendices, which includes information about Dolmenwood itself, religion, noble houses, and it looks like we get specific, oh nice, in the appendices we get specific elf classes, Brego classes, Mossling classes. So we do get our sort of class, race, hybrid class. So that is a nice touch. So all in all, this really looks to be mostly like a version of BX D&D, which is to say a version of Labyrinth Lord, which is to say a version of OSE. Now, of course, remember the author of Dolmenwood was the person who put together OSE. But again, I'm curious to see what they specifically changed. All right, so we've kind of got part 1, welcome to Dolmenwood. The art, the layout, the style immediately make me think Mythic Bastion land. It feels mythological. Are we in the mythological folksy era? But the art and the layout or the art and the style of the fonts and the layout really feel very Mythic Bastion landy to me. For sure. I love the kind of woodcut, very Bayou tapestry, medieval kind of vibe or feel to the artwork here. It's very similar to the artwork that we see in Mythic Bastionland. All right. We got an example of what this game is about. So again, remember, this game is really more of just old school D&D, but being sort of viewed through the lens of this dark, shadowy fantasy world or campaign setting.
Jack tipped $5. Clinking beer mugs emoji. The art is good. Goddamn. Clinking beer mugs emoji.
Very nice. Appreciate you, Jackal. Yeah, that's your new thing, is the clinking beer mug emoji. Yeah, art looks really cool, looks really great, and I think it's really, really, really helps tie me in. I mean, we always talk about how important art is. I always think art is really important. And because this is A5 layout, I'm actually going to go to the book view. There we go. I think that'll look better. So, I mean, Matt, you're opening up this 2-page spread, and you got this wonderful, little vignette here and this neat little thing here. So, thank you, Jackal. I can move it over. In fact, we see here that the inspirational media is things like, I love this, that it's the Fellowship of the Ring, book 1, not book 2 or book 3, right? Book 2 and book 3 are where we get, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. It's where we get the Battle of the Hornburg, right? These big, massive armies clashing for the fate of Middle Earth. And that's not Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship of the Ring is a very different vibe and feel to the later books. I should also point out that from the end of book 1 through book 3, the Fellowship is no longer. The Fellowship breaks at the end of the first book, and now you've got all these different parties running off, doing their own things. Book 1 is very much a group, a party, traveling kind of on the down low, going to mythological and famous places, traversing through places of immense and enormous beauty to places of immense and enormous danger. And it's I think that's kind of an interesting state that they point here. We have books from Lord Dunsany, which of course is very, classic British kind of fantasy in that sort of classical sense. And then there's a bunch of books here that Stardust is one that I'm familiar with, but I'm not familiar with, for example, Crabat. I have not read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I've heard of it, but I've not read it. I have never even heard of Gormenghast. So there's obviously a very eclectic look here. And then we could see things from Miyazaki, but we also see Legend, Labyrinth, and The Green Knight, which these are all, by the way, relatives. These are similar things that we talked about from Mythic Bastionland. And we see Twin Peaks. And so there's this definite vibe here of a weird, strange kind of mythological world. So what are we doing here? Well, we're exploring the wild places. We're unearthing treasure hoards. We're confronting fell beasts. We're releasing saintly relics. We're foraging for weird fungi and herbs. We are striking out against chaos. We are unraveling the secrets of deep magic. We're seeking the counsels of witches or the sinister hag, meddling in the affairs of nobility, journeying along fairy roads, and returning to a homely hearth. Now, all of that is really awesome, except there's one thing that I'm curious about, which is in BX D&D, in Old School Essentials, the way you earn experience points predominantly is through treasure. This follows the classic D&D model where monsters are worth very little experience. They may only be worth, you might only get 10% or 20% of your experience points that you gain from a level from actually defeating your foes, whether that's through combat or tricking them or making them run away or whatever, overcoming them. The rest of it comes from 1 GP equals 1 XP. And while unearthing treasure hoards definitely falls into that category, I will point out that at a certain point, hey, look at that. It's our sponsor for today's stream. It's Koss.
Cost tip $20. Thanks for doing this again. Made my week.
Well, then thank you, Koss. I really appreciate it. Remember, again, at some point, cost, we gotta figure out something that I can do for you with that very generous donation. But I'm happy to do this. And of course, with this tip goal complete, we'll be actually doing a part 2 look at this as well, where we'll probably get more into the actual specific hex scroll without trying to do too many spoilers. Or maybe we'll do a part of it where we kind of generically talk about it, and then we'll put like a big spoilers warning. So one of the concerns I would have with this is, thank you again, Kos, is a lot of these things like exploring and foraging and unraveling secrets and meddling in the affairs of nobility. In the classic OSE model, these are not worth experience points. So I'm curious to see what, if any, changes have been made. But I'll also add that while unearthing treasure hoards is really cool, for the most part, when I think of like folksy dark fantasy, Legend, Labyrinth, Princess Mononoke, The Lord of the Rings, I don't really think of them as being like stumbling out of Moria with backpacks full of gold, right? That's not really the vibe that we get. That's really more hobbity if you think about it, right? So anyways, so we'll see where we get with this. I'm curious to see. We talked about what's in this book, but clearly this book is meant to tie in with its existing monster book and its campaign book as well. The inside covers. Do we have an inside cover? Oh yeah, we do have an inside cover. Okay. Oh, we'll go to the book spread. This was technically at the start of the book. So this is the player's view of Dolmenwood. Now, I will say, this is we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but I think this campaign setting is perfect. And I haven't even really looked into it too much, but it for me, it is just, when I say this, let me rephrase. I know nothing about it, but what I do know is that the size of it is very perfect. It is just big enough that you can explore it in a reasonable fashion. It is thick and dense with encounters. Part of the biggest problem with hex crawls is they should be called hex boring, because so many of the hexes are just empty. And it's just empty, it's just empty, it's just empty. And we just leave it to random encounters, which is fun every once in a while. But the truth of the matter is, what you can do with a hex crawl is hex log. Cinnabos is way better name. Absolutely, Cinnabos is much better name. Traveling is a lot more fun when there's things to be encountered, and more importantly, it's about environmental storytelling. No. The One Ring Second Edition is wonderful for this, because the One Ring Second Edition doesn't make you do each hex procedure at procedure at procedure. In the One Ring, you might travel 4 or 5 hexes, days worth of travel, before you have your event. So a 10-day journey might only have 1 or 2 events, which is really, really cool. Secondly, the idea of the encounters in the One Ring is to show the signs and the progress of the encroaching shadow, I think. So by that definition, or just the fatigue of the journey. So from that perspective, I think it succeeds at the environmental storytelling aspect. However, I do think that this type of thing is much cooler. Now, I will say, this is obviously, I'm not going to say it's one use, but like if you were to, let's say there's some encounter in this hex here outside of this town of Lankshorn. Well, if you have an encounter here, and it's a really cool encounter, and it's a set encounter, and it helps do the environmental storytelling, obviously, once you do that once, you're not going to be able to do that again. But that's okay. I would rather, these things aren't that expensive. They really aren't, especially if imagine if you picked up this book, and you and your friends played it, and, you're not going to cover every single element. You're not going to cover every single hex. But let's imagine that you play this game for a year or a year and a half, and you manage to, hit up 50 or 60 or 70% of these hexes, and then you never play this campaign setting again, but you have that one great, amazing campaign. I think that's a victory, I think that's a W. So I for one think that this feels doable in a way that a lot of other mega hex super mega crawls don't feel doable. So props to I like the size of this. I like the density of it. I like the pride. I like the size of it and the density of it. So anyways, going back to where we were. Very cool. Okay, so then we have a bit of information here about the races. We got the sentient folk. Notably, this world is humans dominate the settled places of Dolmenwood, but we have these goat folks called Breggle. Breggles divide themselves into two castes, distinguished by the length of their horns. The aristocratic longhorns and the commoner shorthorns. Quick, in chat. I'm not saying that they stole this, but they are British. They are British, right? Gavin Norman, I think, is from UK. Where did they... let's presume for a moment that they stole this. Not stole. Stole is a mean term. Let's say they were inspired. Where were they inspired by this? Oh, Beowulf. Beowulf got it. All right, yeah. The Gore and the Ungore from Warhammer, which are the beastmen in Warhammer. And you have the Gore, which are like the ones with really impressive horns, and they are like the leader of the beast folk. And then there are the Ungore, which have tiny little nubs and are basically used as like cannon fodder, or worse, by the beast folk. So good stuff, Beowulf. Props to you. Beowulf, don't take this the wrong way. I'm shocked that you knew that. Let's see here. Musgrob, will you set up a tip goal for the Monster Book 2? Musgrob, I think we're getting some good support here. We've got about 100 people watching. When we do the second part, we'll get more deep into it. Musgrob, there's absolutely a chance that we'll do the second part on Sunday. Sunday is when we do a lot of our super secret Sunday system streams. And the only reason I have a make-up doctor's appointment, telehealth, that I have to do early. So that's the only reason that tonight's stream is a little bit abbreviated. So Cinnabos does say we need to figure out how to layer the deed system over every game. Damn you, Garblag. Cinnabos, you're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong. I am not a Frankenstein type person where I say we should just take every cool thing and just jam it into everything. But I'll say something here. Things like Sparks and Shadows from Trespasser and the Deeds system from Heroic Deeds are probably worth ripping out and putting into almost every system that you play. Tor said, Tor is so good, it's a shame I'll never have a group who will let me run it. Well, Musgrob, we are going to be running the One Ring. Here on the channel, I'm going to be doing a solo One Ring playthrough with chat. I'm going to be doing it live, and I'm going to be doing the Mines of Moria solo game. So that'll be pretty cool. Anyways, you'll be here Sunday then. Perfect. But does it deed? That's a new one. Yes. And yet you want to redesign a lot of Daggerheart. Yes, I do. But to be clear, the things that I want to redesign in Daggerheart usually don't involve me taking another element from an RPG and bringing it into it. Some of them is just like Daggerheart should just have 12 levels. I mean, that's it's just, it is what it is. All right. That's not like being inspired by that. That's just taking something over from that. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Love this. Again, this is in the player's book, but it talks about the importance of factions. And I think there's a lot that's going right here for me. The other things that makes a hex crawl good is when you make a hex crawl small-ish and you make it dense, then you can make factions important. And how many do we got here? We have the Duchy, great. We've got the Plurtine Church, great. We've got the Cold Prince. So we've kind of got our Fae, kind of quasi-evil Fae of Winter. We have the Nag Lord, who is the Chaos, maybe? A Wicked Trickster. Unholy Court. Okay, there we go. The Droon, a cabal of sorcerers who roam the wood. And the Witches, mortal women who worship ancient deities. Oh, and then specifically, Ygraine the Sorceress. Maybe kind of a Morgana kind of character. So I love that we have these relationships between these, but this is the same thing that, by the way, 13th Age does with the icons. Personally, I think that, 5 to 7 is a perfect number, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7. So this is a great number, and it's going to be dense and thick, and I think that's a really good place to start. We've got a gazetteer, just talking about the most commonly traveled areas. Again, focusing on reusability of the same areas over and over. We'll get more into this when we do with the campaign setting here. The other nice thing about old school essentials type products is the rules usually are fairly light. And so it is much easier to strip out these ideas and concepts and put in your favorite game, in theory. Vintage, we're talking about our last first look, which was heroic deeds. I've been looking like something for the heroic deeds system forever. It is very cool. They were talking about putting it into Dragonbane, and then Bob reminded people that I wanted to do a deeds system for Dragontide, which was voted down by the population, or by the GM Council before we implemented. The difference was it wasn't as cool as Garblags. But what I wanted to do is, because Dragontide was a mega game, was in Dragontide, or in Dragonbane, the game, you're normally playing with, 4 or 5 people playing with one GM. And occasionally, when you do something really cool, the GM can diegetically award you with one of the game's heroic abilities, which is called an HA. Normally in the game, only when you get your skill up to its maximum value of 18, all right, when you max out one skill, you get awarded with a heroic ability, a new heroic ability. And for every 18 that you get a new heroic ability, your choice from the book. Heroic abilities are kind of like feats, but they're kind of like, they're like feats or feat pluses. In some cases, some of them are pretty powerful. Some of them are more flavorful. Anyways, but the GM can also just hand them out. But the problem is that in a mega game, you're playing with a bunch of different GMs. And you might only play with a GM only once, and a GM might feel a little bit weird just handing out heroic abilities to people because they're very powerful. And it's very binary, right? You either get the heroic ability or you don't get the heroic ability. And if a GM gives out too many of them, they might be, known as a Monty Hall GM. And if the GM gives out none of them, they might be considered a stingy GM. So my idea was that the GM could award players deed points. And we were going to have 3 different categories of deeds. We were going to have like deeds of combat, like deeds of exploration, and deeds of something else. I don't remember what the third category was. And the GM could just award you points. And it was kind of like a form of experience points. You would accumulate deeds in those categories. And then you could spend those deed points to buy heroic abilities from that category. In other words, you couldn't use points from deeds of exploration to pick up the, rapid fire shot heroic ability. And so there was kind of this idea of tying the actions that you did. And remember, the GM would award these deed points based off of what you did. It wasn't like a guarantee. It wasn't like an XP system. It was just like, if you did something really cool in combat or really cool in exploration, the GM might say, that was really awesome, gain a heroic deed point. And so that was kind of the idea behind that. So anyways. All right. How do we start play? Well, this is a role-playing game. It is a shared, ongoing narrative exploring the adventures of a group of imagined characters in an imagined world. Well done. We even have like the old school, this is like how D&D was always explained back in like the 1980s and stuff. Is like, imagine playing cops and robbers. Kids do not play cops and robbers anymore. And they even talk about like, what about the inevitable bang, bang, I got you. No, you didn't. Yeah, that's not what happens anymore. That was maybe 1970s or something like that. Then they go watch Smokey and the Bandit, is what this might as well say here. But anyways, we got a bunch of stuff here about how to play role-playing games, including a basic example play, which we'll skip. How I just like I like the art style. It's very whimsical and fantasy-like and fairy-like, which I like. We have a terminology of terms. The glossary is early, But you know what? We're about to just talk about the games, and so that's okay. And remember, in this type of game, the glossary is mostly just like for vibes, because very rarely do you ever have like traits or tags or keywords or anything like that, And we see all the things here. Like, for example, loyalty, a rating for a retainer's loyalty to employing PCs. Okay, so this really is just this is really just OSE. This is really just BXD&D. Like, they're including the loyalty modifiers. The level for a creature versus the level for a dungeon. You gotta love it. Our polygons, all that other stuff here. We've got game turns that are 10 minutes long. Oh, nice. These are all hyperlinked. That's cool. A round is roughly 10 seconds. Nice. 6 turns to an hour. 6 rounds to a minute. Gotta love it. We've got our character stats. We've got our ability scores. We've got our kindred, which includes a size and our type. In this game, we do have a distinction of whether you are a fairy, a mortal, or a demi-fae. So, yeah, that's another classic thing, Tundalist, from Basic D&D. As a kid, I absolutely hated this. As an adult, it makes so much more sense to me, because I understand as an adult that the primary thing that you were worried about tracking during the course of an adventure was coins. So yeah, doing encumbrance in weight of coin made total sense when the game was all about treasure. We got levels, we've got hit points. Hit points are rolled. If you get to 0, you die. And when you gain a level, you roll your hit dice and add it to your max. AC goes up, and what we would now call THAC0, back then we called it THAC0. They now call combat aptitude, which is how quickly your attack and saves advance. Save targets. So we've got the 5 categories of Doom, Ray, Hold, Blast, and Spell. And of course, in original D&D, this was known as, saving throw. We had Death, we had Paralyzation, we had Dragon, Breath Weapon, we had Spell, and we had Rod, Staff, or Wand, which I guess they call it Ray in this game. But we had Poison and Death and Poison, Rod, Staff, and Wand, Petrification, Polymorph, and Paralyzation, Dragon Breath, and Spell. But here they call it Doom, Ray, Hold, Blast, or Spell. I'm curious if I like these better or not. I guess it depends on how they define Ray, but because again, in original D&D, the idea was you had one saving throw, which was, by the way, usually the most generous, which was the one against poison or death. And you might say, why are poison and death put together? Well, remember, poison in original D&D killed you. So basically, poison and death was the same thing. It was, something that would instantly kill you. And it was almost always the most favorable of the saving throws. By the way, this is just a kind of a random aside as we talk about basic D&D. One of the things that I really liked about the original basic D&D in it was its attitude towards the saving throw, which was they acknowledged that this thing should just kill you, right? Or they acknowledged that the gaze of the Medusa, there is no chance that the gaze of the Medusa, if you watch, Jason and the Argonauts, right? Yeah. There is no chance that the Medusa doesn't turn you to stone. The Medusa's turns you to stone 100% of the time. That's just the way it works. And poison kills you. A death spell kills you. Like there's this idea that in a way, this is another example of when I talk about how Blades in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse are really just taking old school concepts and sort of reimagining them. in a way, saving throws were kind of like resistance from Blades in the Dark, where the fiction is you're turned to stone. Oh, you saw a Medusa? You turn to stone. But because our characters are protagonists and because they have bullshit plot armor, the game basically said that wouldn't really be fair. We're going to, I'm sorry, you're right. I am thinking Clash of the Titans, Keith. 100%. Thank you. I am thinking Clash of the Titans. The game says, look, that's bullshit. We'll give you this kind of bullshit plot armor. Maybe you were able to save yourself at the last second. Sorrel, thank you. Got these books and they are amazing. They are a really nice value and very, very, very nice, very pretty. Exalted Funeral's making some really nice products. And I say that as someone who, got these books and got my Land of Eam. So they look really, really nice. And a lot of their books are really, really produced really well. The OSE box sets are really, really nice. So they're doing a great job with that for sure. But yeah, it's plot armor. And the thing about it is, I think there's a modern belief that, like, if your character sees a Medusa, you saw the Medusa, and then the energy of the Medusa hit you, and then you made your fort save, and you didn't turn to stone, right? I think that's what a lot of people imagine in the modern sense, right? But I think the original D&D said, no. You didn't see the Medusa. If you had saw the Medusa, you would be turned to stone. What the saving throw represents was some bullshit thing where, you looked away at the last minute, or, she got distracted and looked the other way as you crossed, or, you had your head down at just the right moment. You didn't actually look at her. Right. So there's this kind of interesting flip of how these things, kind of are imagined to work. And I always think that's kind of interesting. With saving throws versus poison, I think a lot of people in modern D&D imagine it's like a Bene Gesserit, right? Or Paul, converting the water of life, right? Like your character chugs the poison and then they make their fort save, and it's like your body is like fighting off the poison, and you're rearranging it, and then you vomit it back up, and you all have an orgy, right? You might think I'm just being weird, but that's literally what happens in Dune. But anyways, it's literally called the spice orgy, by the way. So but my point is, it's like, no, like the original D&D would say something like, maybe the poison didn't, hit you that, prick you that much, or maybe the poison was slightly dried, or, you got lucky. The idea of the saving throw was that it was luck-based, which is why the original saving throws had absolutely nothing to do with your ability scores, right? They were just, and it got better as you got higher level. Why? Plot armor. They were just plot armor. That's all. Anyways, moving on. So we've got speed, which apparently is in feet. Yeah, hit points or plot armor. Yeah. You die at 0, right? That's true, Beowulf. You get turned to stone, and then you keep making saves so that you can, like, break out of the stone. Yeah, I didn't make that up. Frank Herbert made that up. Alignment, we've got neutral, lawful, chaotic, the original old school thing here. Background, a secondary profession or skill set gained to a character's upbringing. Black backgrounds play no mechanical role in the game rules, but referees may use them as an aid to judge whether or which actions a character can perform. So in other words, they do have a mechanical role, but just not in a systematic way. And here is a monster's stat block. They have a size, a type, an intelligence, a hit points, a saving throw, an attack, their morale, and an XP. And guess what? This is literally a monster's stat block. Their AC is 12. They have 2d8 hit points. Their saving throws are here. This is the value you have to roll equal to or higher than. They have 2 attacks. Their speed is 80 feet. Their morale value is 7, and they're worth 20 XP. Oh, Flash, there is absolutely no doubt that being instantaneously turned to stone with no recourse is horribly unfun. So yes, it is. You are 100% right. And here we have just a great example of how to make a character. We've got the character sheet right here. We're still using scores and modifiers because why not? So what it looks like we did with wisdom in this game is make it. I don't know if they did this in OSE, but I think this is specific to Dolmenwood. It looks like wisdom is used as a bonus to magic saving throws against magical stuff, which is interesting. Dexterity is used for AC and missile attacks. Constitution is added to hit points per level. Charisma is used for your reaction rolls. Intelligence is extra languages because there's no skill system. And strength is for your melee attacks and damage rolls. You got your AC, you got your speed, you got your saving throw, and it looks like you do have skills for listen, search, and survival. I wonder if those are on like a D6 roll. We'll see. All right, you roll 3d6 for each of your character's ability in order. Strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. Note that in original D&D, ability scores went in a different order. The reason being is that constitution and charisma weren't used by any of the classes as a prime attribute. Only these ones were. So basically you had the fighter stat, you had the fighter stat, the magic user stat, the cleric stat, and the thief stat. A note on randomness. Quit bitching. That's what this basically says. You are encouraged to savor the fun, unexpected characters that result from these random results. The character creation examples. It is crazy how much modern gamers hate randomness, especially in character generation. So, right. Well, yeah. Original D&D is basic D&D, Scotty. I mean, when I say basic D&D is just a continuation of OD&D from 1974. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let's take a look, Kevin. You may be right. Wisdom. You are right. That is from BXD&D. Wisdom modifies magic-based saving throws. Adjustments to magic-based saving throws do not apply to saving throws versus dragon breath. They may affect saving throws versus death, ray, or poison, depending on whether the attack is magical. These adjustments do affect saving throws versus turn to stone, versus wands, versus rods, versus staves, and versus spells. Okay, good call, Kevin. I guess that is nothing. That's nothing from OSE, or that is from original BX. There you go. Anyways, I have noticed that a lot of people really hate randomness in character creation. We used just the tiniest bit of random randomness in our character creation for Dragontide, our Dragonbane mega game, and people really were like, they were very not happy about it in some ways. However, if you roll less than 8 in every ability score, or a 6 or lower in more than one, you may discard the character and roll again. Oh, absolutely, Zarian. I mean, in the original Traveler, you could die during character creation. You really can't anymore in the modern Traveler, but you used to be able to die in character creation. When we did a Traveler game, we didn't really get far in it, but we made characters. Everyone started off with these ideas of like, we were going to be Star Trek The Next Generation. And instead, because of randomness, it turned out that the party was a bunch of old ex-Navy guys who ended up buying a boat or a space boat and turning it into a version of the Love Boat, where they were now basically an intergalactic private cruise line that took really wealthy people on sort of joy rides across the different sectors. That's where we ended up with in our game of Traveler because of randomness. Zarian says that's awesome. Oh, we loved it. We thought it was amazing. In fact, Beowulf, if he's here, is like, I think that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Whenever I tell that story, he's like, I want to play that game. Like everyone thought it was going to be like grenades and space lasers, and it turned out that the maitre d skill or whatever was like the most powerful skill in our game. We got all the basic OSE rules here for creating characters and all this other stuff here. We got a nice little table here. And again, okay. There you go. He's here. So we have 9 character classes instead of 4. They range from, we still have the cleric. We still have the fighter. We still have the mage. And we still have the thief. But we added the friar, the hunter, the knight, the enchanter, and the bard, which is interesting. Their hit points range from D4 to D4 to D8, as is the case with modern or old school D&D. And it looks like most of this is the same, but we can see that the cleric still gets holy magic only from level 2 or greater. They get their turn undead ability. But it does look like they've added some stuff here. And again, my knowledge of OSE is a little light. I usually just run BX, but we have a hunter who looks like they get information for kind of a ranger type character, but martially oriented. Our friar apparently is a non-martial version of the cleric, so more of a priest. By the way, I have come around on this. I don't really like the cleric anymore. I think I like the white mage concept better. The war priest is not something I really think is interesting anymore. The enchanter is kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a fairy magic user. Okay, we'll see what we got here. Okay, we got an optional rule that if you roll 1 or 2 for your hit points, you can re-roll. The only problem I have with this is, okay, if you're a magic user, you're only rolling a D4, so you get to re-roll 1s and 2s. But if you're like a fighter and you have a D8, you only get to re-roll 1s and 2s as well. I kind of dislike this. Not that I want to make my game softer, but I will say what I typically do for level 1 is I make it your hit die divided by 2 plus half your hit die. So, for example, fighter would be basically D4 plus 4. Wizard would be D2 plus 2. So that's what I usually do. So a fighter's starting hit points are 5 to 8. A cleric's starting hit points are 4 to 6. That's what I usually do when I play BX D&D. You can buy your equipment, 3d6 times 10 gold. That's literally the number from BX D&D. And this is a weird artifact of D&D. Oh, okay. We get 8 travel points per day when traveling overland. So it looks like that is definitely a new rule that I am not familiar with. Again, it might be an OSC, but this is also me kind of covering OSC because I never covered it before. Normally, overland travel just used your travel rate and kind of got expressed as miles. So that's really interesting of this alignment there. Okay. Then we have an example of rolling a character, which is really funny because it's so simple. Like, what do you? I already call bullshit. They rolled a 16. Come on. Do you get prime back? No, maybe. All right. We got our ability scores. Note that these do not use what most people are familiar with from 3rd edition and 4th edition and 5th edition, where, 10 to 11 is 0, 12 to 13 is 1, 14 is 2, 16 is 3, 18 is 3, 4. No, instead, at 9 to 12 is nothing. 13 to 15 is a 1, 16 to 17 is a 2, and an 18 is a 3. So ability scores really matter less because not only are they random, but even if you roll really particularly well, you're only adding, 1 or 2, extra points, which isn't to say that's not nothing, but it is less. Now, here's my favorite part about old school D&D. Okay, you're a fighter and you rolled really well. You rolled a 17 for your strength. So you get a +2 bonus to hit and a +2 bonus to damage in a game where, every little bit helps. Most people get nothing. Well, guess what? You rolled really good for your strength. So not only are you a better fighter because you have a higher strength roll and you get a better accuracy and you deal more damage, but we're also going to give you bonus to your experience points. For the life of me, I don't understand this. In fact, I think, ready? Okay. I think that this should be reversed. You want to do something really crazy. Have the person with the 16 to 18 strength get like a -10%, to their XP, and have the person with the absolute shit strength, who is a fighter, have a bonus to their XP. I think that's at least a little bit more interesting. Again, I've never understood this rule. It's so rooted in like that old school simulationist vibe. And again, I'm not mocking this game because I love 1981's Basic D&D, which is derived from 1974's OD&D. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat you. I don't understand why a modern audience, would ever acknowledge playing this. Like, it's just like so, it's so punishing. It's like you're already better, and now we're also going to make you better. Cool art. Now, this art obviously looks a little bit different than some of the art that we've seen. I don't hate it though. I don't like it as much, but I still think it's cool, and it's a really neat perspective. I like art that tells a story, and this definitely tells a story. See, look, some people think that it feels more realistic even too if you reverse it, right? The guy with the disadvantages gets by they have to learn more, right? They can't rely on natural talent. They have to use skill. Also, just as an aside, if you do use prime ability XP requirements, just FYI. So let's say you're a fighter and you've got a really good strength. So you've got a 10% bonus to XP. Okay. Guess what? As a GM, you're going to have to sit there and figure out like each person's different XP bonus. Don't do that. A fighter needs 2,000 experience points to level. Just reduce that by 10% to 1,800. And that is exactly the same as awarding them 10% bonus experience points. So then now you don't have to adjust each individual's award. You can just say, hey, you all got 1,000 experience points. And everybody writes down 1,000 experience points, regardless of what their prime experience points bonus is. The person, the player, only has to do that calculation once when they level up. And then that's it. And then when they write on their character sheet, because I don't know about the new character sheets, but the old character sheets used to have a number that says, what do you need to level? And they would just write down 1,800. Or here they would write down 3,600 and so on and so forth. And then you don't have to actually worry about figuring out every time you award experience points, how much to give them. Anyways. So that's what our stats do and the like. Charisma, it's funny because, charisma is a dump stat, and it has been for a long time. And I think it's just because we got rid of reaction rolls. We got rid of loyalty. We got rid of retainers. We got rid of all this stuff from the game. Oh, it's not 100% accurate, but it is more than close enough. Well, Kevin, let's see if they kept this in here in this game. Yeah, so clerics only need 1,500 experience points to level. Fighters need 2,000. Magicians, mages, need 2,500. And thieves should need 1,250, but let's see where they're at. They need 1,200. And the reason why is because being a thief and being a cleric sucked. So they wanted to incentivize you to be them. At least that's what I think. So I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it if clerics got more experience points from that. All right. Here we got another cool. So here's our thing on the races. We've got mortals, which are the goat folk, the mosslings, and the humans. They have no innate magic, and they have a general mindset of sharing this stuff together. Oh, Grimalkins are cat people. Cool. We got our elf with little horns. We got our humans, our goat people, our mossy people, and our woodgrews are like bat people. Then elves and Grimalkins are pure fairy. So elves and Grimalkins are fairy, and they do get innate magic. That's kind of cool. And then but they also get they're also anathemaed to cold iron. They are repulsed by silver. That's pretty cool. And then we have the demi-fae, kindreds of fairy origin that have forsaken the native world to take up permanent reference, and that is only the woodgrew. But they are no longer immortal. They can now die. Their lifespans are very, very long. I should note that, by the way, I love this. Like, the elf is immortal. Like, while they can be killed, they are immune to disease. That's not magical disease. They are immune to time. They do not die naturally. Like, that feels like a legit... Like, one thing I love about the One Ring, among many things I love about the One Ring, is that elves in the One Ring are actually fucking elves. And these little details like this don't matter for like 99% of campaigns, but I think this is cool. I think that's neat that your character is actually immortal and that you don't get sick and you don't die from, normal diseases and stuff. I think that's cool. Or that you carry this, air of unearthliness and that, animals are unnerved by you. That's cool. That's neat. And so then we get into the pages on the characters, the races. We've got information about, we got name tables. Love to see it. I think name tables are great. Names are hard. I always say that. Names are really hard. You got random height tables, of course. That's great. And then you get, you actually do get a little bit of bonus from your race. You get +1 armor. You get a charm gaze, and you get a horn attack. I also like that your level is tied to how long your horns are. That's awesome. That is very cool. Once you get to level 4, you are a longhorn. That's pretty cool. All right, you know what? Goat folk, the Breggle gets a thumbs up from me. I like the name. I like the vibe. And I think that's really cool. Very cool. All right, thumbs up for me from the goat folk. This art kind of makes me a little bit unnerved. Kind of reminds me of like Rick and Morty art a little bit, and the Rick and Morty art I don't like. Maybe it's just something about the eyes. I don't know, but they are goats, and goats have weird eyes, so maybe that's correct. We have a random background and a random trinket member, which again, none of this I think really matters. I mean, they say the backgrounds don't matter mechanically, but your GM might allow you to, it might come into effect when the GM determines whether you can do something or not. Random desire, demeanor. So you could probably use this for PCs, but you could also use this for NPCs, which is really cool. Elf, ageless fairies. I love it. Your starting age is 1d100 years times 10. So you could be anywhere from 10 years old to 1,000 years old. What's wrong with goat folk being PCs? Why do goats have to be evil? I cannot figure out why and how and when you accept certain things as being like why is an elf okay to be a player character or like a fairy? Like they're way more unnatural and weird, right? Elves have a skill target of 5 for listen and search. They have minor magical talents known as glamours. Each elf knows a single random glamour. They get a +2 bonus to their magic resistance because of their magical nature. And when interacting with mortals, an elf gets a +2 bonus to charisma. But they do take extra damage from cold iron. Very cool. They cannot die of thirst or starvation or disease of non-magical origin. And again, we get the elf's backgrounds, the elf's trinkets. Yeah, elf seems really cool. I love that they're really fair. They're very fae-like in their elf nature. They get a thumbs up for me as well. The Grimalkin are mercurial feline fairies who shift between forms. They have a humanoid form, which is that of a humanoid cat wearing clothing and speaking upright, very Puss in Boots coded. They have a fat moggy form, which is in Chester form. A Grimalkin resembles a normal cat in all respects, but perhaps a bit fat. And then they have a fey predator form. They are difficult to perceive in the mortal world as more than a gleaming pair of deranged eyes. So very like Cheshire cat. So again, it feels weird and fairy and strange. They originate from the fairy realm of Catland, ruled by the queen of all cats. They enter into Dolmenwood as a wanderer's adventurer. So they are quite literally immortal fey alien spirits who come here. And they are shape-shifting and weird and strange. Right, but not if the goat folk are very common and they're like all over the place, and you know, this is cool. I love the names. I would rock. I don't even like cats, and I would rock any of these names. Boots Bobble Whisk is a fantastic cat name. Lord Cotton Socks fucking rocks. Tipsy Whippletongue. I fuck with that. Penny Poppletail. Monsieur Pounce Mouse. That's great. Kitty Wispy. Jaspy Fluffikin. That's a good one. Nibbles Fluffikin. I like Nibbles Fluffikin. Prince Ratbane. If you want to be a little bit more a little bit more intense. Somebody wants me to roll 2d20. Sir Pounce. Oh, what is Sir Pounce from? Oh my God, I'm having like a complete brain fart. What is Sir Pounce from? It's not from Harry Potter, is it? It's from it's from Game of Thrones. Okay. But who was Sir Pounce? That I don't remember. All right. Roll 2d20 here. We got Ginger. I don't even know what this is. Is this a 20? Yeah. Ginger Whiskers. All right, that name's not great. We'll roll again. At 19. Okay, Tompkin Tail Whisk. That's good. I like the alliterative nature. You know, I like the Tompkin Tail Whisk. I could go with that, but I would probably prefer like Tipsy Tail Whisk or it's Tommen's cat. Okay. Ginger Whiskers is just Bob. Yeah, that is totally true. All right, anyway, this is great. I love this. This is great. They're small. They get +2 bonus to their AC because of their size. That's huge. After spending 1 turn devouring a freshly killed giant rodent, they heal a hit point. They get a glamour. They're immortal. They're magic resistance. They can shapeshift in your fat cat form, which is, by the way, unlimited. And then you can only enter your wild form once a day, where you become nearly invisible and you indiscriminately target friend and foe because of your chaotic fey nature. And after 2d4 rounds, you return to your humanoid form. You're also vulnerable to cold iron. Well, I don't like cats, but I'm going to say this gets a big thumbs up for me. This is awesome. Yeah, look at that. There we go. There's the fey predator. And then there's the humans. Boring ass humans. I mean, of course. By the way, to someone who pointed this out earlier, humans and Breggles do marry and have children. So there you go. Breggles are very much integrated into the, into the setting. But humans can be cool. We're humans. It depends on what they do with them. All right. When initiative is rolled, humans act first. There you go. So they're very decisive. That's cool. They have leadership, so they oh, nice. Humans are quick to learn and adapt and get a +10% bonus to all experience points earned. This is an addition to your prime attribute bonus. I like this. This is very cool. This reminds me of EverQuest, which is where in the original EverQuest, the good races, the ones that were really powerful, got an experience point penalty, but humans sucked because they didn't get any cool abilities, and so you got an experience point bonus for being a human. For some odd reason, you got a bigger experience point bonus for being a halfling, even though halflings did get special abilities, so halflings were kind of OP, but humans were okay. Very cool. Mossling, gnarled woody humanoids whose fertile flesh hosts mosses, molds, and fungi. They are obscure stunted folk native to Dolmenwood okay, I'm getting their hair is like moss and ferns. After death, even their bones rot away to mold, turning into rich compost. All right. I'm getting like Druidine vibes here. Which is if anybody knows what a Druidine is, like from Lord of the Rings. They get knacks. They're good at survival. As a mossling ages, their dank, fertile flesh picks up seeds and spores who germinate into symbiotic plants and fungi. The character requires a random trait from the symbiotic flesh table. Does it do anything, or is it just weird? Edible toe cheese. Skin riddled with mycelia, yeast infections in moist places. All right. I guess this is okay. All right, this one's a little weird for me. It's not that they're bad. I just don't get the vibe of them. All right. Woodgrue are bat-faced demi-fae goblins, known for their love of music, revelry, and arson. They are bat-faced goblins who forsook their ancestral home and migrated to the mortal realm. They have magical enchanted songs. They enjoy the company of everybody. And they've got some interesting names. They're small. A lot of the classes or races in this game are small. They get a musical medley ability. Once a day, they can play an enchanting melody on their pipe instruments. Okay. And can either make people reveal their deepest secrets. They can make people dance. They can make people be mocked. True. Like, what is it? Like he turned into a cow or something and had sex with somebody. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember the one thing with Zeus where it's like he turned into a bull or something and had sex with a cow. And I don't even remember the whole thing about it, but yeah, Greek mythology is really weird. All right. So for classes, we do get some new classes that are not in, core BX/OSE. We get the Bard. So the Bard kind of quasi gets skills. And they can decipher documents. They can do small feats of legerdemain. They get monster lore, and they can get I guess every class gets a listen chart. So assuming this is based off of BX D&D, I'm going to guess that these skills use a D6. Which is one of those weird things that BX D&D did. You have a D20 system. Your stat gives you a bonus, and you're like, oh, do you roll under your stat? Nope. You roll a D6. And you're like, why do we roll a D6? I don't know. Remember, 3rd edition is the game that sort of unified everything into one roll to rule them all. Back in the day, you used to roll a bunch of really different, weird, random things. Thieves used to roll percentages. Turn Undead used its own 2d6 plus modifier table. Using like your chance to listen something. Your chance to listen to something was a D6 or D6. Here they kind of expanded it to a couple different, because again, this Bard wasn't in original D6, but or it wasn't original BX. But there are some strange things here too that do feel more modern. Like for example, if you try to steal something from someone, your initial chance is a 1 in 6. And of course, this is always the real interesting question, which is, do skill systems tell you what they can do, or do skill systems tell you what you can't do? So for example, what if somebody else other than the Bard wants to perform a sleight of hand? What if you want to slip poison into somebody's drink? What do? Do you say, no, you can't do that, you don't have legerdemain? Or do you say, yes, I will let you do that? And then you come up with some ruling. Except the thing is a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3 Bard only passes this 1 in 6. They need to roll a 6 on a D6. So you have to give them whatever you ask for or whatever you call for a roll has to be pretty bad, because otherwise the Bard is actually worse at doing this than you were. So it's a very tricky, it's a very tricky thing to get right. And again, it only becomes a problem when you add in skill systems, right? Like what if the magic user or the magician wants to decipher a document? Do you tell them, no, you can't, you're not a Bard? Or do you say, maybe you could? What's your background? Again, there's always these weird areas that enter. The more rules that you add, the more you have to be worried about this type of thing. But anyways, so here we are for bards. They're saving throws. Take care, Beowulf. And again, you can see that by the time you are high level, remember, saving throws are not modified. There's no such thing as a DC. Your chance to avoid doom is going to be requires rolling a 6 or higher on a D20. So 75% of the time, you will make your save. It doesn't matter what the source of that effect is. You're going to make that save 75% of the time. So pretty good odds, all things considered. And so it's regardless of what it is. So it really is like a plot armor type effective. Okay, they give bards kind of a enchantment singing that they can use once per day per level. So these classes definitely are more involved than your standard BX D&D. Very cool. And that's it. I mean, the bard doesn't get any spells. They get, this kind of unique little skill chart here where they get really good at monster lore and deciphering documents. Now they may have changed it for Dolmenwood, but in original BX D&D, no TSA agent. There was no modifier for level difference. Now, it's interesting, Kai or Kiki 87, because I will agree with you that there's this idea of, the bard just can do it because it's on their sheet. Another character has to explain why they can do it. The problem is that kind of logic and reasoning also means that then the bard doesn't really have to try. And it's a role-playing game, so shouldn't you be trying to connect your mechanics to the fiction? And you just say, no, I don't have to explain it. I just have it. So I agree with you, but also it is kind of a weird thing. But I will say that philosophy, what you just said there, is exactly the philosophy behind Powered by the Apocalypse. In Powered by the Apocalypse, anyone can do anything. But if your player character or your playbook has a special move, then you can do it. You don't have to sort of rely on the GM saying whether you can or not. It's an idea of taking that power back from the GM and not relying on their bias. And some people hate that. So anyways, or at least I've determined that people hate that. Also note, as in old school games, at a certain point, you stop gaining hit points. I mean, you get 1. Once you reach 11th, 10th level, you just gain 1 hit point per level. You don't gain any more hit points. Once you reach a certain point, you don't need any more hit points. G Helmet FB says, I can say I hate that. Yeah, it is a very common, response that people have to that. Bard seems cool. All right, here's our cleric. They get any armor, they get any shield, they get any weapon. Oh, nice. Normally, clerics could only use bludgeoning weapons. They get D6 hit points per level. Note that they do not get a spell at level 1. They only start getting spells at level 2. They can detect holy magic. They can cast holy magic by carrying a holy symbol with them. And they have, you can see that their saving throws are even better. They get D6 hit points, start getting 1 at level 11. You pick a holy order, which gives you a additional ability. Oh, they are very closer in philosophy than they would. I say this all the time. I say that PBTA and OSR are closer together than the modern trad game. And people think I'm crazy. So I'm right there with you. I've said this before and people are like, what are you talking about? And I go, I'm absolutely 100% driven with this. They are both, I think, fiction first with rules that sort of overstate the fiction. So otherwise relying on the GM move. Remember I'm not going to get into the conversation. We're doing a first look. Okay, the Order of St. Faxus gets bonuses against arcane magic. And here you go. Here's an example. Arcane spellcasters suffer a -2 penalty to saving throw. So here's an example of a very specific rule over saying what I was saying about saving throws, where these people are very good at rooting out dark magic. And I do think that that's cool. I love the idea of, kind of a inquisitorial religion who thinks that all magic is dark magic. I think that's really neat. Here's the Order of St. Sedge, who gets a lay on hands ability. Once a day, they can heal 1 hit point per level. Huge, right? And the Order of St. Cygnus gets a bonus against undead monsters. And lastly, the Cleric's primary ability is the turning of the undead. We roll 2d6, again, its own unique bespoke mechanic. If you get, depending on what you roll, you either destroy them or cause them to flee or make them stunned. Here, normally you get this bespoke table that breaks down the different types of undead. Here we get a kind of modified version of that. You anonymous?
Anonymous tipped $13. We love first looks. But so much of Dolmen's greatness is beyond its core mechanics, so I hope a second look happens. Smiley face emoji.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do that on Sunday. So people seem to be really supporting this, and I think it's a really cool book, and I think it's definitely worth taking a look. Here's our enchanter. Thank you, by the way, Anonymous. Oh, that was Tundalus. Of course it was. I should have known. So the enchanter does not have magic. Instead, they have innate magic called glamours because they are connected to the power of fairy. And I do remember that it said that elves get these glamours, right? So do the Grimalkins. Enchanters are also blessed with fairy runes, guarded by the lords of the fairy. So that's kind of cool. So we're not really sure. I'm not really sure what fairies do, but we can see that they can detect magic, and they level up faster than a mage. And they get fairy runes, secret magical sigils guarded by the rulers of fairy. Excuse me. They know one randomly selected rune. I assume they keep this, but magic users used to have to randomly roll for their spells. I fucking love it. And they also possess minor magical talents known as glamours. They start with 1 and they get up to 10. Basically getting a new glamour roughly every other level. They get 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8. It's an interesting progression. I don't know that I hate it, but it's an interesting progression. Like it's like you get 1, 2 really quick, and then you're like, oh, then it's going to be 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6. Like, no, it's like, no, you get 2 more right here really quick for some odd reason. I don't know. Maybe they just wanted you to get to 10 and they couldn't make it work any other way. I don't know. That's interesting. Interesting. The saints of the Pluralitine Church are loath to aid those allied with the godless world of fairy. If the enchanter is the subject of a beneficial holy spell, there is a 2 in 6 chance that it has no effect. Very cool. Here's our fighter. So normally, fighter in old school BX D&D was literally just a fighter. They just got every weapon, and that was it. Couple things here. We see that they do get a combat talent. So this is already a more complex fighter, where they start with nothing, but they do get to eventually 4 combat talents. Also note that fighters usually ended up having basically the best saving throws in the game, and we could see here that this is the case. Again, a high-level fighter has a 90% chance of saving against, poison, death, doom, which is pretty cool. I also note that's kind of cool here is that they also stop gaining hit points after level 10, but they keep getting 2 hit points per level, which is kind of a cool little tip of the hat there. As for these combat talents, you choose one at 2, 6, 10, and 14, and you roll. Roll or choose. But it looks like we've got things like kind of a barbarian berserk rage. We've got a cleave ability. We have a last stand. If the fighter is killed by being reduced to 0 hit points, they can continue to act up for 5 additional rounds before dying. Each time the fighter suffers any further damage during this period, they must save versus doom or die. Magical healing is effective during this period, but the fighter must still save versus doom when damaged, even if healed to above 0 hit points. Oh, nasty. But cool. I think that's really neat. Fighter keeps going. Like in a game where everyone dies at 0, the fighter can keep fighting. Fighter's going to fight. That's actually a really cool rule. But I like that you're not like invincible. Like you can still just instantly die. But otherwise it would be like you literally are immortal for 5 rounds, and that could cause problems. That's actually really, really neat. I like that a lot. I like cleave, but I always used to use the heroic cleaving rule anyways, kind of from AD&D in my applying. Anyways, very cool. Oh, this is my absolute. I would ban this, as everyone knows. The fighter is an expert with a specific type of weapon chosen by the players. They get a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls with this weapon. This is absolutely my least favorite rule in existence. This is why I don't like BECME and why I do like BX. I think fighter weapon specialization is the worst thing to ever happen to D&D. Yes. So I would completely remove that. We got some weapon spec haters in the chat as well. All right, Single Bean, love it. Yes, Muzz, a very, very, very Boromir coded. I love it. Frier. So here we have the wandering ascetic who spread the gospel of the Pluraltine Church. This is a D4 non-martial cleric class. They are friars, monks, or nuns. Worst thing because of what Single Bean said. Worst because what makes a fighter cool is that they can basically pick up any weapon and they're good with it. That's going to be their weapon. But once the fighter becomes the longsword guy or the great hammer girl, then it's like she's only going to use that weapon. And it kind of, I don't know, it kind of defeats the coolness of that class, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And, you know, I like random treasure. So does the game. So, yeah, it all works out from that. So the Friar has to follow the tenets of the church. They are very much not a combatant. They are almost monk-like in their aestheticism. But they do get spells from right off the bat. They can use magical items, but they also get an additional benefit to foraging. And they can... they're especially beneficial with medicinal herbs, being able to basically double the dosage. A single dose can affect 2 people. What's really interesting to this is I'm curious to see when we get into the main campaign setting is how important this foraging and herbs and fungi are as well in the context of the game. I personally think that's kind of a cool idea. If you tie the kind of predominantly healing into foraging more than just, you know, spamming spells and taking long rests. Also note that they could do D4 damage with a cured sausage or a frying pan. Very, very, and people said Wilder Feast was weird. Well, here you go. They also can turn undead, just like the cleric. All right. The hunter is a D8 companion with or D8 hit point with a +2, so very much martially coded. But they only use light armor, and they get an animal companion. And they get their hunter skills. If the hunter party is surprised, they may make an alertness check to act normally in the surprise round. They get hiding and sneaking rolls, and they can only use these in the wilderness, not indoors. And they've got their own little table of wilderness skills. And again, all the classic questions about, you know, skills like, okay, so what? No one else can track? How do you determine if I can track? And if I can track, hopefully I don't track better than the hunter who has this hunter skill target. Again, skills are a very complex question, and I don't mind skills in a system, but then if you're going to use skills, I kind of want you to go all in on them. If you're not going to use them, I kind of want them to not be around at all, if that makes any sense. They also get a +1 flat bonus to a missile attack weapon. So this is what I want the ranger to be. If you're going to have the ranger, I want the ranger to be the hunter. Like, I don't mind the Lord of the Rings ranger, right? The literal, guard against humanity. But if you're going to make this kind of weird hunter animal companion person, I want it to be like a hunter. I'm okay if it's magical or not magical, but I'd rather it be like ranged weapons with an animal companion, that type of thing. Good at being alert, stalking, survival, tracking. None of this, like, the ranger is such a weird class. It's like it's a 2-weapon close combat melee, but also ranged weapon, but also animal companion, but also druidic magic, and also skills. But maybe it's such a weird class that has just been pulled apart in so many different directions. I think this is much more focused. And given that the game takes place, the name of the fucking system is Dolmenwood, and presumably a lot of the game is going to be moving and traveling through hexes, and having to survive and track and stalk things is going to be important. You actually can feel somewhat reasonable in choosing this class. Oh, okay. Here's another martially oriented character, the knight. Ironically, they can't use light armor. They can only use medium and heavy. I like that. Players are knight errants, wandering the land in pursuit of chivalric virtues. You have a liege to one of the noble houses of Dolmenwood. You can either choose or roll. You have to be the same alignment as your liege. You use all melee weapons, but cannot use missile weapons, which they regard as dishonorable. Love it. If you played Warhammer and you know the Bretonians, you'll know that knights in Bretonia never used missile weapons. They viewed it as being very dishonorable. They scorn light armor, suitable only for peasants and villains. I love it.
I am strong.
That's great.
Strong.
I don't know if I've ever seen in D&D before a game that a character gets the heavy armor but doesn't get the light armor. I absolutely love this. I mean, because it's one thing for them to be like, turn their nose down on it, but no, they don't even have the proficiency. They have to act according to their code of chivalry. And if they fail to uphold it, they risk disfavor. They're really good at being on a horse. They're expert riders, and they can, make their horse go fast. Knights at level 1 and 2 are only squires. They are not true knights. Ooh, cool. From level 5 onward, you get +2 to attack and damage rolls against large creatures because you are a monster slayer. You always get +1 when mounted, and you get +2 to saving throws versus fairy and fear. So they're kind of like a martial paladin, which is really cool. And here we have the code of chivalry. You have to seek glory in combat, protect the weak. You're bound by your hierarchy of the social order, and your knight's honor is of utmost importance. Death is preferable to dishonor. Very cool. Nothing like over the top, nothing crazy, just, If you suffer disfavor, you become a fighter of equivalent level. They penalize you by making you into the other class, thus letting you know what the other class is like, right? And here are some of the lower houses of Dolmenwood. Here's our mage. Yeah, I mean, but, yeah, then you get the light armor because now you're a villain, right? Now you're a disgraced knight. You're like a hedge knight who used to be an awesome knight, right? You used to be a noble knight errant, a servant of noble House Harrowmore. But alas, you brought disfavor and dishonor to yourself and to your house. And now, but you are but a lowly hedge knight selling your sword for a night's drink or a night's pleasure. And now you wear leather armor as befits your terrible station. You know what? I'm here for it. No, I like the idea that you always knew how to use it. You just absolutely refused to use it. I should have served House Hogwash. Lax and debauched. So mages, suck, except for they get broken abilities to, make fireballs appear and kill everything eventually, right? You roll a D. Okay, so instead of rolling a bunch of random spells, you roll a D6, and that gives you kind of a themed package, which I will admit is more playable. And, it's a little bit flavorful as well. So your first spell book may be an item inherited from a mysterious ancestor, stolen from a cruel master, or meticulously copied from a mentor. Roll or choose. So we have Charms of the Fey Court, giving you Fairy Servant, Ingratiate, and Ventriloquism. Hogbrand's Incandescence, giving you Firelight, Ignite, Extinguish, and Shield of Force. Lord Oberon's Seals with Decipher, Glyph of Sealing, and Vapors of Dream. This sounds like the sleep spell. Oliphant's Folio, giving you Crystal Resonance, Ioun Shard, and Shield of Force. Smith's Illuminations, Decipher, Ignite, and Ioun Shard. And the Treatise on Force and Dissolution. Crystal Resonance, Floating Disc, hell yeah, and Vapors of Dream. Kevin points out the nice thing about each book is it has at least one combat spell. Very cool. Love that art. Again, wizards suck. They get D4 hit points. They require a shitload of experience points. Their saving throws are abysmal. Like even a level 50. Remember a fighter's saving throws at level 15? They were like 3, 4, 4, 5, 4. Look at these characters. Look at his saving throws. They're horrible. His hit points, terrible. His attack bonus, terrible. His experience points requirements, obscene. And by the way, Fireball and, Disintegrate and stuff were powerful and broken. And guess what? In modern D&D, Fireball and Disintegrate or whatever are still powerful and broken. The difference is back then, wizards sucked. They didn't suck. They were very powerful. But I mean, like they were balanced, by being horrible at every other aspect of the game. And then they got rid of that. So. Shocking. Speaking of classes that suck, here is a thief. D4 hit points, by the way. Light armor. No shields. But you get a backstab. And this isn't like, flank the target. Nope. You have to be behind the target. And they cannot be aware of your presence. In other words, they either have to be like surprised or you're hidden. Basically they have to be unaware that you are there and you have to be behind them and then you can backstab them. So it's, this was always the case up until third edition. Third edition turned backstab into sneak attack, and sneak attack was just like, hey, every time the opponent is denied their dexterity bonus to their armor class, aka is flat-footed, or if you are flanking the target, then you get to deal this extra damage, aka a lot and often. The original thing here was much more difficult. But I should point out that, doing 3d4 damage with a +4 bonus to attack roll was pretty significant. And we get our thief skills, which historically were percentage based. But here we can see they are D6 based. Now you do get all of these skills. And this is one of those things that, here's one of these things that I really struggle with. And again, I have to remind myself I need to go in 20 minutes so I don't miss my doctor's appointment. and can't get my prescription before I go on this cruise. So people look at PBT. This is what I don't understand. This was D&D. This was D&D for the 70s. This was D&D throughout the 80s. Okay, this was D&D. This was arguably D&D in the 90s because AD&D did not have a skill system. It had non-weapon proficiencies. You know, there were the hints of a skill system. But for the most part, the thieves had these skills. No one ever, to my knowledge, ever looked at AD&D and said, oh, only thieves can climb walls. Only thieves can listen at doors. Only thieves could ever, move in a shadow or move silently or be stealthy. Only a thief could ever search a room. Even though the thief class existed and had these skills, the thief skills, no one ever said that a fighter couldn't climb a wall. But then, and that was true for like 25 years. And then 3rd edition came along. And then PBTA came along, and PBTA has these playbooks. And a playbook might literally, like in Dungeon World, the thief playbook has the where is it? The thief playbook has, I don't remember if Dungeon World has a table of contents. Probably not. Oh, it does. The Thief Playbook, wow, is much later in the book than I thought it was. Okay, yeah, so the Thief Playbook in Dungeon World has moves like Trap Expert, which allows it's a move that triggers when you would, basically disarm a trap. Okay. Or there's a different one here for picking locks or picking pockets called Tricks of the Trade. And people would look at, I've seen people with Powered by the Apocalypse say, oh, this is why I hate Powered by the Apocalypse, because only a thief can pick someone's pocket. This is why I prefer 3rd edition, or why I prefer skill system, because anybody can do anything. And it's really strange to me how 3rd edition and its skill system really changed the mindset of an entire generation of gamers. Because the truth of the matter is PBTA was just like this. Where, yes, the thief had these skills, but that didn't mean that nobody else could do it. But when 3rd edition came around, people just assumed that if it's on your character sheet, then you could do it. And if it's not on your character sheet, you can't do it. And if it's on somebody else's character sheet and it's not on your character sheet, it means that only they can do it. And so I think that's a really interesting kind of point of comparison and how this works. Anyways, thief skills. I've always hated the thief, though, so it doesn't matter. It's my least interesting class. And, absolutely, Bruno. Absolutely. The difference, Bruno, is that Pathfinder 2nd edition made that the entire game, right? And so at that point in Pathfinder 2, if you're ignoring all those feats, if you're ignoring 11 class feats, 6 ancestry feats, 6 general feats, 10 skill feats, maybe another 10 class feats from free archetype, if you're ignoring those 40 feats and they don't really matter, then what are we doing here? That's the problem. That's the funny thing, Quest Friend, though, is going back to the original, they weren't really good at it. Remember, this is you have to roll this number or higher on a D6 in order to succeed. So that means that a level 1 thief, in order to disarm a mechanical thing like a trap, needs to roll a 6 on a D6. In order to pick a lock, they need to roll a 5. In order to search for something successfully, they need to roll a 6. In order to be stealthy, they need to roll a 5. So actually, they kind of sucked at it, all things considered. Anyways. All right. And that was it. Those are the classes. Okay, so real quick, I have to see what the glamours do. But so what I want to do before I leave, because, again, we're not going to get through all this, but I wanted to cover, well, actually, you know what? I mean, we have magic. equipment and animals is just like, equipment and animals, right? So I'm not too worried about that. And we have some of the basic adventuring stuff. Oh, look at that. Awesome. That is such a cool piece of art. I don't even like cats, but that is an awesome. It's like a knight samurai cat person. We'll pick up some of this stuff here on Sunday. We'll go through the Dolmenwood thing too. We'll have a proper 4-hour stream. But most of the rest of this is just rules for traveling, which is not to say that I want to ignore it, because I did want to see how travel worked with those travel points. It looks like it's just movement, but we'll see. But I did want to see how these fairy magic works, because that is something that is new, and it's tied into some of the new classes. It's tied into some of the new races, which I think is really cool. Yeah, exactly, Kevin. It was really terrible. Is my issue with the thief mechanical or fictional? Both. Mechanically, it doesn't interest me. And then from the fictional standpoint, like, most thieves aren't really thieves. They're like adventurers in an adventuring party. They're not really ever stealing anything. So I don't know why they're thieves or rogues. And in modern games, most rogues are really more like, awesome dexterity-based fighters, rather than, that, like, in like a Dark Souls game, they would be like the character that, has like the daggers and is like doing parkour and hitting the enemy in their weak spot. It's more of it's not really a thief or a rogue. It's more of like a super dexterous finesse fighter type person. Correct. It would be hard to make someone roll something worse than you need to roll the max value of the die. Yeah, maybe. Right. But now we're creating all sorts of crazy rules, right, Osiris Monster? But you are right. A non-thief would need like a 10 on a D10. That's the kind of scale that we need to think about here. And I don't disagree with you. I think Shadow Dark does do this really well, which Shadow Dark basically says, we don't have a skill system. Instead, if we want to roll dice, make it a skill check. And you'll add a strength bonus, or you'll add a dexterity bonus, or you'll add a intelligence bonus as appropriate, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. Oh, are you a thief? Cool. Is it something that is thiefy? Cool. Roll with advantage. Yeah, that is a very good solution to this. Woodchuck. Yeah, Woodchuck was cool. Woodchuck was a thief. They literally found him in prison. And he doesn't really do anything. He just kind of steals stuff. If you want to see a really good thief, example of a thief in D&D, go watch 1985's Conan the Destroyer. In 1985's Conan the Destroyer, there is a thief that's part of their party named Malik. And he doesn't do shit. He steals stuff all the time. And like the one or two times that you actually see him like do something, it's like he hides the entire fight, and then he jumps out at the end onto a guy who didn't even know he was there and like stabs him in the kidneys a couple of times from behind. And that's the only thing he does in the entire fight. Conan kills everybody else. The one guy kills, that's what he does the one time. Well, that's the interesting thing too, Scotty, right? The original game didn't have a thief. You are quite right. So one could argue that the reason why the thief feels so weird and awkward and creates all these problems is because it wasn't in the original, Men and Mortals book, right? It didn't come out until the Greyhawk supplement. Yep. That I've never heard before. Yeah. And Malik the Thief became the court jester at the end. In fact, she, God, what's her name? She becomes Queen of Shadowzard. Jenna. At the end, she's giving everybody from the party. She's basically taking Conan's party members away, which is shit. But they do all look to him for permission. And she says, every queen must have her fool. And then he goes, he like tries to walk forward and stumbles and trips. And he goes, do I qualify? And she goes, more than. And then he looks over at Conan, and Conan goes, yes. And but the point is, he's not even particularly dexterous. He trips. What's my take on the FU Rogue then? FU Rogue is cool. But that's because Fabula Ultima doesn't have skills. So I do like the Fabula Ultima Rogue. I'll actually take that back. Um, so looks like it adds your ability modifier. So what it does seem to say here is that you roll a d6 and add any situational modifiers. And it says the referee may apply modifiers to a skill check, ability check, depending on the situation. I don't see that it adds your ability score to a skill check. I could be wrong, but it doesn't look like it adds your ability. For a skill check specifically. A character's training and aptitudes, as defined by their kindred, class, or ability score, strongly determine their chance of success. In the case of ability checks, this makes a huge role. Well, I agree, but an ability check is something different than a skill check. An ability check is you're just making a strength check. You're just making a whatever check. And in that case, you add D6 and add the modifier of the ability, and a 4 or higher. It's always DC 4. But that's different than a skill check. A skill check is different than an ability check. So, and it says in the case of ability checks, you add the modifier. So if you're making a listen check or a search check or a survival check or any of the checks from the thief skill, that is their skill checks. That does not have anything to do with your ability scores whatsoever. Just bringing that up. Now, what's interesting, too, here is that in original Basic, you did have ability checks, and it was a D20, and you had to roll under your stat, right? So, like, if your stat was a 16 or if your stat was a 14, you had to roll a D20, and if you rolled 14 or under, you made the strength check. In fact, that's why I always joke that, like, people are like, oh, roll under is so crazy and weird. Well, the original Basic D&D had basically roll under. It was called an ability check. In fact, that's how non-weapon proficiencies worked in AD&D 2nd edition. Non-weapon proficiencies were tied to one of your ability scores, and then you got a bonus or a penalty to it, and then you had to roll under that value on an unmodified D20 roll. So, yeah. But in this game, which is interesting because they still make you record your ability score, and the reason why it used to make sense to have an ability score and a bonus is because they applied to different things. Like a strength score was used for strength checks, meaning it was the actual score of 13, 14, 15, 16, and you had to roll D20 less than that, or less than or equal to. And then the bonus was added to like attack rolls only. It wasn't used for strength check. It was only used for attack rolls. It's interesting. Anyways, it doesn't look like this is the case. All right, so let's take a look at magic. So we got magic. We got arcane magic, which is recorded in ranks, of course, spell books, nothing normal there, nothing weird there. You can store only 3 spells per spell book. I actually love that. Or you could use simple rules and ignore that, but I think it's really cool. Researching spells is very expensive. But again, one of the original ideas, I think, of the game that people, again, for most part in modern D&D, never do. But if you look at the original version of D&D, including AD&D and AD&D 2nd edition, and even D&D 3rd edition, there were a lot of rules and a lot of assumptions that wizards and clerics were going to be making their own spells. In fact, in some ways, it was like, what am I supposed to use all this money for? And the idea was you were supposed to create your own spells. And I think that is something, again, that sort of has been really lost over the years. And now we don't research a new spell. What do we do? That's right. We buy a third-party supplement from, or a new Kickstarter or something from Drive-Thru RPG or DM's Guild. That has more spells in it, and that way we can just pay money for it. But in the original version of the game, but again, the original version of the game was, in my opinion, it was less like, oh my God, we only have 2 weeks before the dark god destroys the world, and we have to go, 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 go. Campaigns had a lot more downtime, a lot more time to breathe, and there was a lot more of a slower paced approach to the game. Yep, I agree with you, Kevin. All right, so memorization only can occur after a night's rest. Nothing normal here. In combat, casting a spell counts as your action. You can't move. This is also true for BXD&D. The intention to cast a spell, remember, BXD&D, like OSE D&D, uses declared phased initiative, my favorite type of initiative. And so what you do is, at the start of the round, everybody declares what they're going to do. Then you roll initiative, and then you determine the order in which you go for it. And in this case, if you say you're going to cast a spell, then you roll initiative. If you're hit, you lose that spell that you were going to cast. Here are our spells going up to rank 6 in this book. We got basically light. We've got Tensor's floating disc. We've got hold portal, called Glyph of Sealing. Cooler name than hold portal, by the way. Shield of Force, cooler than shield. Vapors of Dream, cooler than sleep. Ventriloquism, called ventriloquism. Ingratiate, I kind of like Charm Person better, but ventriloquism, one of the most unused spells of all time, unless you have a super heavy combat as war group, and then they'll somehow try to figure out how to min-max this spell so that they can use it to like auto kill God. But other than that, not particularly useful. Floating disc, the spell everyone wishes that they had in Torchbearer. Note, by the way, the encumbrance, it can hold up to 5,000 coin. That's how we do that kind of descriptions. We're not going to go through every single spell, but we are going to go to fairy magic. And this is going to be the last thing that we cover for tonight. And again, we'll probably cover some of the other rules and stuff to see if there's any differences and how that applies to the game when we cover part 2, but then we'll do the campaign book as well. So I have a theory. Again, I've got, well, I mean, I need to finish like in a minute, but my appointment's at 10. So I just need to finish long enough so I can check in and do all this other stuff. I have a theory, which is the type of group that you have, now this is back from the day when like a group was a group. Like you just stuck together, you grew up together, you played together. I have a theory that the type of player that you are, the type of group that you are, really comes down to how your GM or DM handled in your first role-playing game, like the first major group that you played with, how they handled illusions, I think determines the type of player that you are, today. Well, to be clear, Kevin, I'm not literally going to go through every single hex in the campaign book. Number one, that would be shitty and full of spoilers. It's really more to kind of just see how it's laid out and, what are the types of content in it. We're not actually going to go through everything. I'm presuming the campaign book is a lot of, descriptions and encounters and that, descriptions of factions and NPCs. We're not going to be going through each and every single one of those. We're just going to say like, oh, cool, a section of NPCs. Maybe we'll look at one and move on. But I grew up, even in 3rd edition, Smith and I were both very, very, very pro illusion, very, very pro, like these things just work. And I know a lot of players grew up with GMs who basically said, the illusion doesn't work, or oh, you cast an illusion. They make a saving throw. It does nothing. Or they'll be like, oh, they go forward and touch it because they're like, oh, this is probably an illusion. I'll test for illusion. Oh, yeah, see, I told you it was fake. Like, and then just move on. Whereas in real life, if I'm not familiar with an area, I'm not going to doubt whether or not a wall is real or not. Of course it's real. Like I'm never going to doubt that it's real. So in our group, we got a lot of leeway with illusion magic and spells like suggestion and spells like that. So I know that it seems like there are two types of players, people who grew up with GMs who are really permissive about illusion magic, and GMs that were basically like, none of this shit ever works, just cast fireball next time, right? Anyways, so fairy magic. This is a unique magic system to Dolmenwood. We know that people like races, kindreds like the elf and the grimalkins can cast some of these glamours innately. And there's also the enchanter class, which can cast these and acquire these runes and fairy runes. So fairy magic takes two forms. We have glamours, which are innate to folks touched by the power of fairy, and then the runes, which are guarded by the fairy nobles. Glamours are innate abilities, and while mortals regard them as magical, to fairies, it's just, a natural thing. It is absolutely Mother May I, combat is war, GM, pixel bitching, say so, 100% Tundless, which is why it either worked or it didn't work, because some GMs were like, no, it doesn't work. They see through it and they keep attacking you. All right, glamours. There is no limit to the amount of time that they can be used per day. If you use it in combat, it's your action for the round. Glamours cannot be disrupted, so it's kind of like an innate magical ability. Okay, cool. Runes are the deepest magical secrets. Discovered by mighty elf sorcerers, runes tap into the fundamental magic of fairy. Their use is governed by the ancient and immutable laws of fairy, and fairy nobles guard them. Intangibility. Runes are intangible. They are not physical, so they cannot be given or stolen. Magnitude. There are lesser, greater, and mighty. I think the runesmith from Arcana Involved had the same category of runes. Let's see. I could be wrong, but I want to see here. One of the classes from this book was the Rune Thane, which Tim was. Very cool class. And the Rune Thane used rune magic. And the Rune Thane had lesser rune, advanced runes, and greater runes as they went up in level. So, interesting. I wonder if there's a thing there. It is acquired by the mercurial whims of the fairy nobles. And whenever you have a chance to acquire a new roll, you roll 2d6 and consult the table. You get a bonus as you get higher level. And the GM can offer additional bonuses or penalties based on your relationship with fairy nobles. That's kind of cool. Like if you're very ingratiated with the fairy nobles, they are more likely to potentially grant you more powerful runes. So this is totally random. If a rune is granted to which a character already knows, the number of times it may be used is double. So it's totally random. So right off the rip, you could get a mighty rune. But you're usually going to get a lesser or greater rune. Runes are activated by thought alone. No need for gestures. Yeah, also, by the way, 2 or less, because you can get a penalty. Like maybe you fucked over one of the fairy nobles and they give you a -2 at the GM's discretion, and you roll like a 3 and you get a -2, so you get a 1. Fickle displeasure, no rune. Beowulf says, oh, this is sweet, and self-confessed cynic says, yeah, I thought literally Beowulf would love this. The magical laws governing the fairy runes place strict limits on the number of times that you can use a rune. If you are levels 1 to 4, you can use a lesser rune once per day, a greater rune once per level, and a mighty rune once ever. That's kind of cool. As you get higher level, you can eventually use it twice or 3 times a day, and even the mighty rune becomes once per year at level 10. If the referee wishes, a character may be required to journey to a noble's court in Fairy to receive a new rune rather than receiving it in a dream or vision. You can either do this as a downtime event or you could play it out as a full adventure. Note that when you journey in the fairy world, 2d20 days pass in the mortal world. Cinnabos says this optional rule should be mandatory. I'm going to tend to agree. Even if you don't play it as a full adventure, I think you should totally be required to go into the realm of fairy to get these, ancient runes of fairy from the noble kin of the fairy court. That's awesome. Whereas Vin says, no way. You're soulless. Okay, fine. All right, I'll buy that. Okay, how about that? Like, you can get a lesser rune. You can get a lesser rune in a dream or a vision. But one of the greater runes or mighty runes, yeah. All right. Yeah. Oh, that's very classic fairy time travel type shit, right? All right, so here are our glamours. And then here are our runes. There's only 6 runes of each. All right, Vin says fair trade. Mighty is in person only. I can get behind that. You can set your, you can set your thing like, okay, is it lesser runes? Is it greater runes? Or is it mighty runes that you have to go get in person? Tundalus says this is the least Vin game. I don't know. I think Vin would appreciate I think a game like this is very, combat is war, just fucking make it up. Let's fucking go. Use ability checks and we'll go from there. So again, glamours are pretty easy to use. They're almost more like little minor magical effects. The runes are the big deal. So here are some of our glamours. We're not going to get through all of these, but we'll take a look at a couple of glamours. Awe. The caster's dramatic gesture affects and unnerves a group of mortals or animals, triggering an immediate morale check. If it fails, they are awestruck and flee if they are lower level than you. And you can use this once per turn. That's once every 10 minutes. So that's pretty cool. And remember, by the way, as you could be an elven fighter and have this ability because it's just part of your natural, fey, innate, magical nature. You could conjure treats out of thin air. The treats are real, but they do not provide genuine sustenance. Now, again, does this have any mechanical effect as opposed to awe? No, but if the treat is offered to the mortal or animal, their disposition towards you is improved. So I guess it is kind of mechanical. You can conjure a small dancing flame. You can kind of blow the wind around. You can conjure fairy dust. Motes of glittering dust fill the air around the caster, momentarily revealing invisible creatures or objects. And you can do this once a day. So these are all very cool. And remember, elves and Grimalkin just get these, which is neat. And by the way, I think one of these goes a long way, especially if you feel like you're getting it for free. I cannot reiterate enough how much little once per day abilities, even though they don't really add a ton of to the character's power level, can really have a lot of really cool, power. To be clear, I'm not going to the doctor. I'm literally going to leave my lights on. It's a telehealth thing. I was supposed to see him earlier, but he didn't show up and I need to get the prescription filled. So I contacted customer service and I'm going to see some West Coast person at 10. Yeah, I know, Cinnabus. I get what you're saying. All right. Lesser runes. These are the common. We're going to look at one lesser, one greater, one mighty. Okay. Deathly Blossom. Duration lasts 1 turn or until used. An exquisite rose is covered, white rose is conjured in your hand. One who smells the rose must save versus doom or fall into a deep faint, appearing dead for 1d6 turns. So that's 10 to 60 minutes. Duration. The flower remains in existence until it is used or a turn passes. Only a living creature is affected. Now remember, we can use this once a day because it's a lesser rune. Or like a fog cloud or a gust of wind. So there's a little bit of a magical nature here. Here is a greater rune, which I think we can use like once a week or something. Arcane Unbinding, 120 feet. All magical effects of arcane or fairy origin in a 20-foot cube are negated. Effects created by lower or equal level casters are automatically ended. Higher level casters are unaffected. Magical items are rendered ineffective for 1 turn, but items from holy magic are unaffected. We could also do a rune of invisibility, which lasts a day, rendering you invisible to the sight of all beings, along with all of your stuff as well. And lastly, the mighty runes, guarded by the lords of Faerie. The dream ship. Remember, this is once ever. 1 turn appears in the caster's presence. A phantasmagoric galleon sails down from the sky and docks next to you. The caster and up to 12 companions may board the ship. The ship ferries the caster and companions off to any named destination within Dolmenwood. The passengers experience a delightful voyage aboard the ship, drifting through a dreamland of pink clouds and cavorting sylphs. The voyage seems to take 1d6 hours, but whatever the perceptual distance of time aboard, the journey takes a mere 10 minutes of real time. And we'll do one more, the Rune of Death. Invoking the power of this rune brings death upon 1 or more mortals or animals within 30 feet. A total of 4d8 levels worth of mortals or animals must save versus doom or die instantly. Creatures of the lowest level are affected first. If you are 8th level or higher, you are unaffected. And also, wish. However, every time you cast this, you lose 1d3 con permanently. And you can just rework reality. So, also resurrection. So, like, hey, you can wish for anything in the universe. You can unravel death, or you can take a sick-ass boat ride once. Still, this is the kind of stuff I would expect. So, to be noted, the power to like wish and stuff is not a wizard ability. It's like a runic fae thing, which is kind of cool. Okay, well, I'll say this. This game is OSE. There's a couple of changes, like with the D6 system instead of a percentage-based system, which I think is cool. But I will say this. The game is very much tied into this fantasy world of Dolmenwood. And I think that's cool. And maybe this is the new thing, right? If system is setting, and if setting is system, then maybe the future is systems that are only usable inside of one setting. Maybe the death of the generic RPG has come finally. And from here on out, it's all Wilderfeast and Land of Eam and Dolmenwood. And it's just, we only make games that are designed to play in this one particular setting, integrating it fully and wholly. So maybe. But it's a very, very cool looking game. Very, very cool looking system. And we met our tip goal. So we're going to do a part 2 for Dolmenwood. We'll probably do it Sunday. And we'll take a look at that with our system stream. We'll continue to take a look at some of the systems, the adventuring and stuff like that. Again, we've never really officially covered BXD&D or OSE, even though I talk about it here all the time. So we'll talk about, the initiative system and some of the travel rules and stuff like that. But we'll also then take a look at the proper Dolmenwood campaign setting. By the way, the player's book, which is what we're looking at today, is 200 pages or so. The campaign book is like 350 or something. Well, Muzz, we'll see. I mean, the monster book in BXD&Ds tend to be pretty slim pickings. I mean, there might be some really cool art, but I doubt we're going to see anything in there that's really mechanically or notable interest. There might be some really cool art, but we'll see. We could potentially look through it. So, but yeah, so this was a kind of a quick first look, but we're going to do 2 parts. And also because I have to hop off and hop onto a telehealth appointment. But yeah, it was really cool hanging out with everybody. It was neat for everybody to show up. I think this is a beautiful game. I want to thank Exalted Funeral for sending me the hard copies and the PDFs. That was really nice of them. Appreciate it. These things do add up. If you do, are you interested in buying it? There's a doobly link in the doobly-doo below. I didn't think I was going to like the new classes. I did like the new classes. I didn't think I was going to like the kindred. I did like the kindred. I thought, I mean, probably my least favorite was the moss dude. But thank you, Osiris Monster. Appreciate your donation as well. But I liked the elf. I don't even like ghouls. I don't even like cats, rather. I liked the Grimalkin. The weird bat goblin people, I was also not that big on. I didn't really understand them. Maybe it's just their bad nature. If they were just like little goblins, I think that'd be kind of cool. But I don't know why they can like magically play pan flutes. That one I kind of missed on. But the humans, the elves, the Grimalkins, and the what was the other one? Help me out. My brain has stopped working. The Breggles. The Breggles. Yeah, I mean, if I made the wood grew maybe just goblins, that would probably work better for me. Maybe I would just call them Grews or something like that. But yeah, here's the thing. People go, oh, Derek only likes Tolkien. No, I like the integration of those races. I like how well they tie into a world. These ancestries, these kindred, feel well placed. The fairy creatures and the fairy, elements feel legitimate, and they feel different. The way that they're integrated, the way that they're played, it's not just a furry suit, and I like that. So yeah, the Breggles were cool. The elves were cool. The Grimalkin may have been my favorite. Quest Friend says there are other types of goblins and they all have a gimmick. Okay. So we'll get into that. Okay. All right. I'll respect that. We'll again, I didn't say I didn't like them. I just said I wasn't sure about the wood grews, but the mosslings, I'm pretty sure those are a little too weird for me. And I'm not really quite sure people with plants growing in them is just maybe that's just a bridge too far for me. But I liked the bard. I liked their cleric. I liked the enchanter a lot. The fighter, cool, except for the weapon specialist. Get rid of the fucking weapon specialist. Frier's great. In fact, I prefer that to the cleric. I like the idea of a white mage or a priest instead of a cleric. Hunter, knight, both really cool. Mage and thief, of course, but thief still sucks. But yeah, really cool. And the fairy magic seemed really neat and a really cool way to introduce that into the game. In fact, in one of my PF1 games, I remember they saved a pixie once, and the PCs that were present in that session got a special ability, which was like once a week they could call upon the blessing of the woodlands, and it was a cure moderate wound spell. That was it. But other PCs weren't there for that session, and so the characters that did have the blessing of the woodlands and could once a week cast a cure moderate wounds always felt a little cool, a little special. And whenever they used the cure moderate wounds, like there would be like either like drifts of snow or like a rustle of autumn leaves or like the smell of spring flowers. And so, there was always this kind of like cool little moment that we would add, and it just felt cool. And it reminded people of that encounter with that pixie that they saved or that fairy that they saved. And that was really cool. Very effective. All right. That's going to do it for me. I got to head out. Thank you so much for joining. We will be back Sunday to talk more Dolmenwood. I appreciate everybody who supported me tonight. If you're interested in learning more about what we do here at Knights of Last Call, check us out at patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. We'd love to have you come be part of our community. Join our Discord. It's a private Discord only for our Patreon members. And I might be a little biased, but I think it's the best Discord in the whole damn land. So we'll hopefully see you there. If not, we'll see you Sunday next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace.
tomorrow.